It was an unusually quiet evening in downtown Austin. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur whose life revolved around rockets, electric cars, and ambitious plans to colonize Mars, found himself on a rare walk. The city buzzed around him. Neon lights from the bars, the hum of conversations, and the occasional strum of a street musician's guitar. It was a stark contrast to the high-stakes, high-tech world he usually inhabited. But tonight, he craved simplicity. As he turned onto a less crowded street, something caught his eye. A man, slumped against a worn-out bench, was holding a cardboard sign. His appearance was disheveled. Ragged clothes, a scruffy beard, and tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of years. The sign read, "Once a Marine, now forgotten." Elon stopped. Something about the man felt different from the countless others he'd passed before. Maybe it was the unshakable resolve in his posture despite the obvious hardship, or the way the words on his sign hinted at a story worth hearing. He approached cautiously, unsure if his presence would be welcomed. "Hi there," Elon said, his tone warm but tentative. The man looked up, squinting as if the sight of someone like Elon didn't belong in his world. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, his voice rough like gravel. "I just wanted to say hello," Elon replied, "and maybe hear your story, if you're willing to share." The man hesitated, studying Elon as if trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. Finally, he sighed. "Name's Jimmy. Jimmy Harris. And trust me, you don't want to hear my story. It doesn't end well." "Try me," Elon said, sitting down on the bench beside him. Jimmy eyed him suspiciously, but eventually relented. "I used to be somebody," he began, his voice tinged with a mix of pride and bitterness. "A Marine. Served 2 tours overseas. After that, I worked as an engineer on a project that could have changed the world." Elon's curiosity deepened. "What kind of project?" Jimmy gave a dry laugh. "A renewable energy system. Something that could have made fossil fuels obsolete. But you know how the world works. The higher-ups decided it wasn't worth the risk, or maybe it was worth too much to the wrong people." Elon leaned forward, his interest fully captured. "What happened?" Jimmy's expression darkened. "They scrapped it, tossed it aside like it didn't matter. And when I got out of the military, no one cared about me or what I'd worked on. I lost my job, my family, everything." For a moment, there was silence between them, broken only by the distant sound of traffic. Elon's mind raced. A homeless veteran with experience in renewable energy? A project that could have transformed the industry? It was too compelling to ignore. He had a deep respect for those who had served, and he'd always believed in giving people and ideas a second chance. "You said it could have changed the world," Elon said finally. "Do you remember the details?" Jimmy shrugged. "Maybe. But what does it matter now? I'm nobody. No one listens to nobodies." Elon smiled faintly. "I do." Jimmy frowned, unsure what to make of the man sitting next to him. "And who exactly are you?" "Elon Musk." Jimmy blinked, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "You're kidding." "Nope," Elon replied, extending his hand. "And if what you're saying is true, Jimmy, you might be more than a nobody. You might be exactly the person I'm looking for." Jimmy didn't take his hand right away. He studied Elon's face, searching for any sign of mockery or insincerity. Finding none, he finally shook it. "I don't know if I can trust you," Jimmy admitted. "But if you're serious about listening, then maybe, just maybe, we can talk." As the 2 men sat under the glow of a nearby street lamp, a partnership was quietly born. One that neither of them realized would soon capture the attention of the entire world. Jimmy Harris stared at Elon with a mixture of caution and disbelief. A lifetime of disappointment and hardship had taught him to expect empty promises, but there was something different about this man. Something that made him want to take the risk of sharing his story. "You really want to know?" Jimmy asked, his voice low but steady. Elon nodded. "Start from the beginning." Jimmy leaned back against the bench, his eyes fixed on a distant point in the horizon, as if seeing a lifelong past. "I grew up in a small town in Kansas," he began. "My dad was a mechanic, my mom worked double shifts as a nurse. We didn't have much, but they taught me 2 things: work hard and serve your country. I took that to heart. Joined the Marines right out of high school. His voice carried a faint note of pride as he spoke about his service. I did 2 tours in Afghanistan. It was tough, but I was good at what I did. My unit became my family. We had each other's backs, no matter what. Elon listened intently, noting the way Jimmy's expression softened as he talked about his time in the military. But then, just as quickly, it hardened again. After I got out, Jimmy continued, I thought things would get easier. I'd served my country. I'd paid my dues. But the world didn't care. They thanked me for my service and sent me on my way. Jimmy paused, his hand gripping the edge of the bench as if steadying himself. I went back to school on the GI Bill. Studied mechanical engineering. I was good at that too. Landed a job with a defense contractor working on cutting-edge projects. That's when I got involved with the renewable energy system. What was the project? Elon asked, his interest piqued. Jimmy's eyes lit up for the first time since they'd met. It was called Solar Nexus. The idea was to create a decentralized energy grid using advanced solar panels and storage systems. No more power plants, no more fossil fuels. Just clean, renewable energy for everyone. It could have changed everything. What happened to it? Jimmy's face darkened again. Politics. Corruption. The oil and gas companies didn't like what we were doing. Too much money at stake. They lobbied the government to shut us down. Funding dried up, and just like that, it was over. Years of work gone. He exhaled sharply, the weight of those memories pressing down on him. After that, things went downhill fast. I started drinking, missed deadlines at work, lost my job. Then my wife left, took the kids. I couldn't blame her. Who wants to stay with a man who's lost his way? Elon remained silent, giving Jimmy the space to continue. I tried to pull myself together, Jimmy said, his voice quieter now. But every door I knocked on was closed. PTSD made it hard to hold down a job. People see the uniform and the medals, but they don't see the scars you carry inside. Eventually, I ended up here, on this bench, with nothing but a sign and a story no one wants to hear. Jimmy glanced at Elon, his gaze challenging. So, what makes you different? Why do you care? Elon took a moment before responding. Because I've been where you are, not in the same way, but close enough. I've had doors slammed in my face. I've faced failures so big they could have destroyed me. But I've also seen what happens when someone gives you a second chance. Jimmy didn't respond, but his expression softened ever so slightly. I'm not offering charity, Elon continued, but if you're willing to work for it, I think we can do something incredible together. Solar Nexus isn't just a forgotten project, it's a vision worth fighting for. And I believe you're the key to bringing it back. For the first time in years, Jimmy felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. All right, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. If you're serious, I'm in. But don't expect it to be easy. My mind isn't what it used to be, and I can't promise I'll remember everything. Elon smiled, extending his hand once more. We'll figure it out. Together. Jimmy hesitated, then clasped Elon's hand firmly. It wasn't just a handshake. It was the beginning of a partnership that would challenge them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. As the city lights flickered around them, a new chapter began for Jimmy Harris. For the first time in years, he wasn't just a forgotten man on a bench. He was someone with a purpose. The next morning, Elon Musk sat across from Jimmy Harris in a quiet corner of one of Tesla's offices in Austin. The space was modern and sleek, but Jimmy seemed out of place in his tattered jacket and worn boots. Despite Elon's assurances, he couldn't shake the feeling that this might be some kind of elaborate joke, or worse, a setup for disappointment. Elon broke the silence. I want to get started right away. The sooner we dig into what you remember about Solar Nexus, the better. But first, let's take care of a few things. Jimmy raised an eyebrow. Like what? Elon smiled. For starters, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. Food, clothes, a place to stay. You can't think about changing the world when you're worried about your next meal. Jimmy frowned, his pride bristling. I'm not some charity case. I know, Elon replied evenly. And this isn't charity. It's an investment. Think of it as me giving you the tools you need to succeed. Jimmy considered this for a moment before nodding reluctantly. Fine, but don't expect me to get too comfortable. I'm not used to all this luxury. Elon chuckled. You might be surprised how quickly you adapt. After arranging for a driver to take Jimmy to a nearby hotel and get him cleaned up, Elon turned his attention to assembling a team. He didn't want this to be just another project buried under bureaucracy. It needed to be small, nimble, and focused, and that meant bringing in only the best people. By the afternoon, Jimmy returned, looking like a new man. Gone were the scruffy beard and ragged clothes, replaced by a clean-shaven face and a simple but well-fitting outfit. Even his posture seemed different, as if shedding the layers of grime had also lightened his emotional burden. You clean up well, Elon said with a grin. Jimmy rolled his eyes. Don't get used to it. They sat down in a conference room, a large whiteboard dominating one wall. Elon handed Jimmy a marker. All right, he said. Let's start with everything you remember about Solar Nexus. Designs, challenges, breakthroughs, whatever comes to mind. Jimmy hesitated, gripping the marker tightly. For years, he'd buried these memories, convinced they were useless. Now, under Elon's watchful gaze, they began to resurface. It was all about decentralization, Jimmy began, sketching a crude diagram on the board. The idea was to create a network of solar panels that could communicate with each other. If one panel failed, the others would compensate. It was scalable, efficient, and nearly impossible to take offline. Elon nodded, already visualizing the possibilities. And storage? How did you handle the energy surplus? We developed a prototype battery system, Jimmy said, his hand moving faster now as he drew. It was based on advanced lithium-ion technology, but with a new kind of electrolyte that improved efficiency. The goal was to store energy for weeks, not just hours. What happened to the prototype? Jimmy's expression darkened. Destroyed. Or so I was told. The company didn't want any evidence lying around once the project was shut down. Do you think you could rebuild it? Jimmy paused, considering the question. Maybe, but I'd need resources, labs, materials, and people who know what they're doing. Elon leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. That's the easy part. What I need from you is the vision. You're the one who knows what this could be, not just what it was. Jimmy looked at the whiteboard, now covered in sketches and notes. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of the passion that had once driven him. All right, he said. Let's do it. But don't expect miracles. I'm not the man I used to be. Elon smiled. Maybe not. But sometimes, the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. And something tells me you've still got plenty to offer. As the day wore on, the two men continued to brainstorm, their energy building with each passing hour. Jimmy's initial reluctance gave way to enthusiasm as he realized that Elon wasn't just humoring him. He genuinely believed in the potential of Solar Nexus. By the time they wrapped up for the night, the whiteboard was covered with detailed plans, from the design of the solar panels to the logistics of scaling the project globally. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Jimmy turned to Elon. Why are you doing this? You've got everything. Money, fame, success. Why take a chance on me? Elon paused, his expression serious. Because I believe in second chances. And because the world doesn't change by playing it safe. Jimmy nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a purpose and someone who believed in him. Little did they know, their partnership was about to face challenges far greater than either of them could have anticipated. The first step in making Solar Nexus a reality was assembling a team. Elon Musk was no stranger to building powerhouse groups, but this time, he wanted something different. This wasn't just about hiring brilliant minds. It was about finding people who believed in the project's mission as deeply as he and Jimmy did. Jimmy, Elon said, setting down his coffee as they met early the next morning. I know some of the best engineers in the world, but I want you to be part of selecting the team. I trust your instincts. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The idea of being in a position of authority again after so many years felt foreign, even intimidating. You sure about that? It's been a long time since anyone trusted me with something important. I'm sure, Elon replied firmly. You know this project better than anyone else. You might have been out of the game for a while, but that doesn't mean you've forgotten what matters. Jimmy nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. All right, let's see what you've got. Within days, Elon's HR team had narrowed down a short list of potential candidates. The interviews were held in a conference room buzzing with energy, as both men sat across from engineers, data scientists, and renewable energy experts from around the world. The first candidate, a young woman named Dr. Amanda Patel, caught Jimmy's attention immediately. She was an expert in advanced photovoltaic systems and spoke passionately about her work. What drives you? Jimmy asked, leaning forward. Amanda didn't hesitate. My parents grew up in a small village in India that didn't have reliable electricity. I saw how lack of access to power could hold back entire communities. I want to change that. Jimmy glanced at Elon, who gave a small nod. She was in. The next candidate was Michael Rodriguez, a grizzled engineer with decades of experience in energy storage systems. His resume was impressive, but what stood out was his no-nonsense attitude. I heard about Solar Nexus back in the day, Michael said, looking directly at Jimmy. Shame what happened to it. If you're serious about bringing it back, I want in. Jimmy hesitated, surprised by the man's bluntness. Why now? Why us? Michael smirked. Because I'm tired of working on projects that don't mean anything. This could change the world. One by one, the team began to take shape. There was Sarah Lee, a software developer who specialized in AI-driven grid systems. Tom Nguyen, a former Tesla engineer with a knack for solving impossible problems, and Rebecca Carter, a logistics expert who had coordinated massive infrastructure projects in disaster-stricken regions. By the end of the week, the core team was assembled, a diverse group united by a shared belief in the project's mission. That evening, Jimmy and Elon stood in the conference room, looking at the whiteboard filled with names, roles, and tasks. Not bad, Elon said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Jimmy nodded, though his face was serious. They're good. But are they ready for what this will take? For the pushback we're going to get? Elon grinned. You think I've made it this far without dealing with pushback? Trust me, they'll handle it. And so will we. Jimmy exhaled slowly. All right, then let's get to work. The next morning, the newly formed team gathered in the conference room for their first official meeting. Elon stood at the head of the table, but he quickly turned the floor over to Jimmy. This project isn't just about building better solar panels, Jimmy began, his voice steady but cautious. It's about changing the way the world thinks about energy. That means we're going to face resistance, big resistance. The fossil fuel industry, governments, even the public. People don't like change, especially when it threatens their way of life. Amanda raised her hand. So how do we get them on our side? Jimmy paused, unsure how to answer. But Elon stepped in. By showing them that this isn't just better for the planet, it's better for them. Cheaper, cleaner energy that anyone can access. If we can make it undeniable, the resistance won't matter. The team nodded, their determination palpable. But the path ahead was anything but clear. Later that afternoon, as the team dived into preliminary designs and strategies, Jimmy's phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, he stepped outside to take the call. Hello? A familiar voice answered, sending a chill down his spine. Jimmy Harris. It's been a long time. Jimmy froze. It was David Sinclair, the former director of the Solar Nexus project, the man who had overseen its rise and its abrupt fall. What do you want, Sinclair? Jimmy asked, his tone sharp. I heard you're digging up old graves, Sinclair said coolly, bringing Solar Nexus back from the dead. That's ambitious. Jimmy gritted his teeth. You're the one who let them bury it in the first place. Sinclair chuckled. Careful, Jimmy. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. There are powerful people who don't want this project seeing the light of day. Walk away while you still can. Jimmy's grip tightened on the phone. I'm not walking away. Not this time. Sinclair sighed. Suit yourself. Just remember, I warned you. The line went dead. Jimmy stared at the phone, a storm of emotions brewing inside him. Fear, anger, but most of all resolve. He walked back into the conference room, where the team was deep in discussion. Elon glanced up, immediately sensing something was wrong. Everything okay? He asked. Jimmy nodded, forcing a small smile. Yeah, just more reason to make this work. As he took his seat, he realized that Sinclair's warning had only solidified his determination. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, he wasn't going to let anyone stop him, not again. The morning sun poured through the windows of Tesla's Innovation Hub, casting long streaks of light across the conference table where Jimmy and the team were gathered. Stacks of papers, schematics, and laptops filled the space. Yet, as focused as the group was, Jimmy couldn't shake the unease left by Sinclair's warning. He hadn't told the team about the call. Not yet. They were just getting started, and the last thing they needed was paranoia about unseen enemies. All right, Elon said, his commanding voice breaking Jimmy's thoughts. We've got the foundation for the system sketched out. Now, let's talk scale. How do we make this work on a global level without collapsing under logistical or political pressure? Rebecca, the logistics expert, tapped her pen against her notepad. To scale this, we'll need buy-in from multiple governments, private investors, and local communities. But that means one thing: transparency. If we're not clear about what we're doing and why, people will assume the worst. Elon nodded. Agreed. But there's a catch. We're already getting attention, and not all of it is good. Jimmy stiffened, his eyes narrowing. What kind of attention? Elon leaned back, his expression calm but serious. Let's just say a few influential people in the energy sector are asking questions. I've dealt with this before. Every disruptive idea faces pushback. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. Later that day, as the team broke for lunch, Elon's assistant rushed into the room with a tablet. You need to see this, she said, handing it to him. Elon frowned as he scrolled through an article from a prominent financial news outlet. The headline read, Elon Musk's new solar dream. A risky gamble or a PR stunt? He passed the tablet to Jimmy, who scanned the article. It painted a picture of the Solar Nexus project as an overambitious vanity project driven by an out-of-touch billionaire. Worse, it questioned Jimmy's credibility, highlighting his past struggles and homelessness. They're trying to discredit us before we even get started, Jimmy muttered, his jaw tightening. Elon shrugged. Let them talk. They don't understand what we're doing. And honestly, I've been called worse. But what about the team? Jimmy asked, his concern evident. They're going to see this and wonder if they made the right choice. Elon turned to the group, who had gathered around to read the article over Jimmy's shoulder. Listen up, he said, his tone firm but encouraging. This is just noise. We're doing something big, and big ideas always make people uncomfortable. Don't let it shake your confidence. The only thing that matters is proving them wrong. The team nodded, their determination undimmed. But Jimmy couldn't help feeling the weight of the scrutiny. That evening, Jimmy returned to his hotel room, his mind racing. He hadn't thought much about the ghosts of Solar Nexus in years, but now they were coming back to haunt him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He pulled out an old notebook he'd kept from his days at Solar Nexus, flipping through the yellowed pages. The diagrams, equations, and notes were a window into a different time. A time when he believed anything was possible. One name caught his eye, Dr. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn had been one of the lead scientists on the original Solar Nexus project, specializing in materials science. She'd been brilliant, passionate, and unflinchingly ethical. If anyone still believed in the project, it would be her. Jimmy hesitated before dialing the number he'd memorized years ago. To his surprise, the line connected almost immediately. Evelyn Ward speaking. Evelyn, it's Jimmy Harris. There was a long pause. Jimmy? I thought you were gone, he interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping him. Not yet. Listen, I need your help. I'm working on something big, and I think you'll want to be a part of it. Evelyn's tone softened. What kind of big are we talking about? Solar Nexus. It's coming back, but I need someone who knows the tech inside and out, someone I can trust. Evelyn sighed. Jimmy, you know what happened the last time we tried. They didn't just shut us down. They buried us. Do you really think it's going to be different now? I do, he said firmly. Because this time, I'm not alone. Another pause, then a faint smile in her voice. All right, tell me everything. The next morning, Jimmy arrived at the Tesla offices to find the team in disarray. Michael Rodriguez was pacing the room, his face red with frustration. "What's going on?" Jimmy asked. Michael turned to him, holding up a flash drive. "Someone hacked into our servers last night. They didn't get far, but they were clearly looking for something specific, your old files." Jimmy's stomach dropped. "You're kidding me." "Nope," Michael said grimly. "Whoever it was, they knew exactly what to target. We've already beefed up security, but this wasn't some random hacker. This was professional." Elon walked in, his expression unreadable. "We're not going to let this slow us down. If anything, it's a sign we're on the right track. People don't try to sabotage ideas that don't matter." Jimmy clenched his fists. "I'll bet anything this is Sinclair's doing. He warned me to walk away. Guess he wasn't bluffing." Elon placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we'll hit back harder. But first, we need to stay focused. Let them try to stop us. We'll make sure they fail." Jimmy nodded, though his mind was racing. He'd known this wouldn't be easy, but now the stakes felt higher than ever. As the team regrouped and got back to work, Jimmy made a silent promise to himself. No matter who or what stood in their way, Solar Nexus would rise again. Evelyn Ward arrived at Tesla's Innovation Hub 2 days later, her presence immediately commanding the room. With her sharp features, gray streaked hair tied back into a no-nonsense bun, and a tote bag full of old research files, she radiated a sense of purpose. The team, initially skeptical about bringing in someone from the original Solar Nexus project, quickly warmed to her as she began explaining her vision for the materials science aspect of the new system. "So," Evelyn began, setting a prototype solar cell on the table. "This is where we were 10 years ago. Efficient, yes, but far from scalable. The problem was always cost. We were developing materials that could outperform anything on the market, but they were prohibitively expensive." Amanda leaned forward, intrigued. "And now?" Evelyn grinned. "Now we have perovskites. They're cheaper, easier to produce, and more efficient in low-light conditions. Combine that with advancements in nanotechnology, and we're looking at a solar cell that could outperform anything currently available, at a fraction of the cost." Jimmy couldn't help but smile. "That's why I called you." Evelyn nodded. "But it's not just about the tech. We need to think about how to protect this project. If we're already seeing signs of sabotage, we need contingencies in place." Elon leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. "What do you have in mind?" Evelyn pulled out a folder marked Project Phoenix. "We implement a decentralized production model. Instead of building massive factories, we establish smaller, modular production units around the world. Even if one gets targeted, the others can keep operating." Michael Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "That's ambitious, but it could work if we have the right logistics." Rebecca chimed in. "Leave that part to me. I've coordinated disaster relief efforts in war zones. Setting up decentralized hubs will be a challenge, but it's not impossible." Evelyn looked around the room, her confidence growing. "Good. Then let's get to work." The next major step for the team was building a prototype system to demonstrate their technology's potential. Elon secured a test site in the Nevada desert, a sprawling, sun-soaked expanse where they could test their solar panels and grid system under real-world conditions. Jimmy and Evelyn worked closely on the design, while Amanda focused on integrating AI-driven optimization systems to maximize energy output. On the first day of testing, the team gathered at the site as the sun rose over the horizon. The prototype panels, sleek and gleaming, were arranged in a precise grid, connected to a compact energy storage system. "All right," Jimmy said, his voice tinged with nervous excitement. "Let's see what this baby can do." Amanda typed a few commands into her laptop, and the system hummed to life. Within moments, the panels began converting sunlight into energy, sending power to the storage system and the connected devices. "It's working," Amanda said, grinning. "Output levels are right where they should be." The team cheered, but Evelyn raised a hand. "Hold on. Let's test it under stress conditions. We need to know it can handle fluctuations in sunlight and unexpected demand." They ran a series of simulations, using AI algorithms to mimic cloudy weather and sudden spikes in energy usage. The system adapted seamlessly, redirecting power where it was needed most. "This is it," Jimmy said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is what we dreamed of back then. Clean, reliable energy for everyone. But just as the team was beginning to celebrate, Michael noticed something odd on the monitoring equipment. "Wait," he said, frowning. "The storage unit isn't charging as quickly as it should. Something's wrong." Evelyn rushed over, her eyes scanning the data. "It's the heat. The system's overheating under sustained use. If we push it any further, we could risk a meltdown." Jimmy's heart sank. The overheating issue had been a problem in the original Solar Nexus project, and it had cost them dearly. "We'll figure it out," Amanda said quickly, her determination undimmed. "There has to be a way to improve heat dissipation." Evelyn nodded. "We'll need to rework the materials for the storage units. It's going to take time, but it's not impossible." Elon stepped forward, his calm demeanor steadying the group. "Setbacks are part of the process. We'll solve this problem just like we've solved every other one. For now, focus on what we did right today." The team took a moment to regroup, their spirits dampened but not broken. That evening, another article surfaced online, this time accusing the project of being a dangerous experiment with the potential to destabilize the energy market. It cited anonymous sources claiming that Solar Nexus posed a threat to energy security and could lead to job losses in traditional energy sectors. Jimmy read the article in silence, his anger building with every paragraph. He knew this was more than just bad press. It was a coordinated effort to undermine them. "We need to fight back," he said to Elon, slamming the tablet onto the table. Elon shook his head. "Not yet. Let them talk. The best way to counter this is to keep moving forward. Once we have a fully operational system, the results will speak for themselves." Jimmy sighed, knowing Elon was right. But the weight of the opposition was beginning to take its toll. As the rest of the team called it a night, Jimmy stayed behind at the Nevada test site, staring at the prototype panels under the moonlight. His thoughts were interrupted by Evelyn, who approached with 2 cups of coffee. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, handing him one. Jimmy shook his head. "Just thinking about everything that's riding on this. I feel like if we mess this up, it's over, not just for us, but for everyone who believed in this." Evelyn sat down beside him, her expression thoughtful. "You're carrying too much on your shoulders, Jimmy. This isn't just your fight anymore. You've got a team now, and we're all in this together." Jimmy nodded, though the weight of responsibility still lingered. As they talked, Evelyn suddenly froze, her eyes lighting up with an idea. "Wait," she said, grabbing a notepad from her bag. "What if we used phase change materials in the storage units? They could absorb and release heat more efficiently, solving the overheating issue." Jimmy's eyes widened. "That could work. Let's run the numbers." The two of them spent the next several hours sketching out a revised design for the storage units, their excitement growing with every calculation. By the time the sun rose, they had a plan, and for the first time in days, Jimmy felt a renewed sense of hope. The Nevada desert shimmered under the midday sun as Jimmy, Evelyn, and the team prepped the updated storage units for testing. Despite the exhaustion etched into their faces from sleepless nights, hope was palpable. The revised design, incorporating phase change materials, promised to solve the overheating issue, if it worked. As Michael calibrated the sensors and Amanda finalized the system's AI settings, Jimmy stood at the edge of the test site, watching the horizon. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to believe that they might be turning the tide. Evelyn approached him, wiping her brow. "We're ready to go. Want to do the honors?" Jimmy smiled, a rare flicker of optimism in his otherwise cautious demeanor. "Let's fire it up." Amanda initiated the sequence, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The solar panels hummed to life, and the energy began flowing into the new storage units. For the first 30 minutes, the system performed flawlessly. "Heat levels are stable," Michael reported, his voice tinged with relief. "We're maintaining efficiency even at peak output." The team exchanged smiles, the tension in the air giving way to cautious celebration. But just as the trial seemed poised for success, the monitors flickered, and the hum of the system faltered. "Wait, something's wrong," Amanda said, her tone shifting to alarm. Michael scrambled to analyze the data. "It's not the heat this time. It's a voltage fluctuation. Something's interfering with the flow." Evelyn frowned. "That shouldn't be happening. The design accounts for that." Jimmy's heart sank. "Is it a hardware issue?" Michael shook his head. No, it's external. Someone's tampering with the signal. The team's worst fears were confirmed when they traced the interference to a nearby satellite. It was using sophisticated jamming technology to disrupt the system's operations. Whoever's behind this isn't messing around, Amanda said, her voice tight with anger. This isn't just corporate espionage, it's a full-scale attack. Elon entered the room, his expression grim. We've got a mole. Someone's feeding information about our project to the outside. The revelation sent shockwaves through the group. Trust, which had been their foundation, suddenly felt precarious. Jimmy clenched his fists. Do we know who it is? Elon shook his head. Not yet, but we'll find them. In the meantime, we need to stay vigilant and keep moving forward. The attack forced the team to adopt a more guarded approach. Meetings became more secure, and sensitive data was shared on a need-to-know basis. But even as they closed ranks, help came from an unexpected source. One afternoon, while Jimmy was reviewing security protocols, he received an email from an anonymous address. The message was brief but intriguing. I know who's behind the sabotage. Meet me at the Old Silver Ridge Cafe, 8 p.m. Come alone. Against his better judgment, Jimmy decided to go. The cafe was nearly empty when he arrived, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. A man in his early 50s sat in a corner booth, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap. Jimmy Harris, the man said as Jimmy approached. You've made quite a few enemies lately. And you are? Jimmy asked, sliding into the booth. The man smirked. Call me Nathan. I used to work for Sinclair Energy. Jimmy stiffened at the mention of Sinclair. What do you want? Nathan leaned forward, his voice low. To set the record straight. Sinclair doesn't just want your project to fail, they want you to fail. Completely. They're using every resource at their disposal to discredit you and shut this down. Jimmy's eyes narrowed. Why are you telling me this? Because I've seen what happens when Sinclair destroys people's lives. I'm not proud of the role I played, and I want to make it right. Nathan slid a USB drive across the table. This has everything you need to prove Sinclair's involvement. The bribes, the shell companies funding the sabotage, all of it. But be careful. If they find out you have this, they won't stop until they bury you. Jimmy hesitated before taking the drive. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, Nathan said, standing up. But if you want to take them down, you're going to need all the help you can get. Back at Tesla, Jimmy shared the contents of the USB drive with Elon and Evelyn. The evidence was damning: emails, financial records, and internal memos that outlined Sinclair's efforts to undermine Solar Nexus. This is a game changer, Elon said, his eyes scanning the files. If we release this, it'll expose Sinclair for what they are. But it'll also make us an even bigger target. Evelyn nodded. We need to be strategic about this. If we go public too soon, they'll deny everything and turn the narrative against us. Jimmy looked at the team, his resolve hardening. Then we use this to buy ourselves time. We leak just enough to keep them on the defensive while we finish the project. Elon smiled. Now you're thinking like a disruptor. With the threat of Sinclair looming larger than ever, the team poured their energy into perfecting the Solar Nexus system. The sabotage had only strengthened their resolve, and the addition of Evelyn's expertise and Nathan's intel gave them an edge they desperately needed. As the days turned into weeks, the prototype system finally stabilized. The overheating and voltage issues were resolved, and the team prepared for a second trial run. This time, they were ready for anything. The test site was alive with activity as the team prepared for the second trial. Trucks delivered new components, drones hovered overhead monitoring conditions, and the hum of machinery filled the air. The sense of urgency was palpable, but so was the quiet determination. Jimmy stood by Amanda as she fine-tuned the AI optimization system, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. How's it looking? He asked. Amanda didn't glance up. Better than ever. I've added a predictive algorithm. It should anticipate and counteract potential disruptions, including voltage fluctuations or external interference. Michael joined them, holding a clipboard. And I've triple-checked the new storage units. If we get overheating again, I'll eat my hat. Rebecca, always the pragmatist, approached carrying a binder. Just in case, I've got contingencies for every imaginable failure scenario. We'll make it through this. Evelyn stood a few feet away, her sharp eyes scanning the setup. She seemed calm, but Jimmy could tell she was as invested in this trial as anyone. And then there was Elon, standing at the center of it all, his presence a steadying force. He caught Jimmy's eye and gave a small nod, as if to say, "We've got this." At precisely 9 a.m., Amanda activated the system. The panels once again came to life, shimmering in the sunlight as energy flowed into the revamped storage units. For the first hour, everything ran smoothly. The predictive algorithm kicked in, seamlessly managing energy distribution and stabilizing output levels. "Heat levels are perfect," Michael reported, his tone a mix of excitement and relief. Evelyn checked her tablet. "Efficiency is holding steady at 98%. That's better than we projected." The team exchanged cautious smiles, but no one dared celebrate just yet. As the trial progressed, the system faced increasingly rigorous simulations. Clouds passed overhead, creating periods of reduced sunlight. Amanda's algorithm adjusted the energy flow instantly, compensating for the dips without breaking a sweat. Then came the real test, an artificial power surge designed to mimic the demands of a small city during peak usage. Jimmy held his breath as the system absorbed the surge. For a moment, the monitors spiked, but the storage units adapted, dispersing the energy evenly across the grid. "It's working," Amanda whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The team erupted into cheers, but their celebration was cut short when a warning flashed across Amanda's screen. "Wait, we've got an anomaly," she said, her voice sharp. A black SUV appeared in the distance, speeding toward the test site. "Who is that?" Michael asked, his tone laced with suspicion. Elon's expression darkened. "Not someone we invited." The vehicle came to a stop, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out, flanked by two others who looked more like bodyguards than colleagues. The man approached with a confident stride, ignoring the uneasy glances from the team. "Elon Musk," he said, extending a hand. "We finally meet." Elon didn't move. "And you are?" "Christopher Ward," the man said, smiling, "Senior Vice President of Sinclair Energy." The tension in the air was almost tangible. "What brings you here, Mr. Ward?" Jimmy asked, stepping forward. Ward's smile widened. "I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. You've made quite a splash in the energy sector lately." "It's impressive, really." Jimmy's fists clenched. "If you're here to intimidate us, it's not going to work." Ward chuckled. "Oh, I'm not here to intimidate anyone. I'm here to offer a deal." Elon's eyes narrowed. "We're not for sale." "Everyone has a price," Ward replied smoothly. "Sinclair Energy has deep pockets. We could fund this project, take it to the next level. All we ask in return is a partnership. You bring the innovation, and we'll handle the distribution." Jimmy stepped closer, his voice low and filled with barely restrained anger. "You mean you'll bury it, just like you've buried every other innovation that threatens your profits?" Ward's smile faltered. "Be careful, Mr. Harris. Making accusations without evidence can be dangerous." Elon stepped between them, his tone icy. "I think you've seen enough. You can leave now." Ward held Elon's gaze for a moment before nodding. "Very well. But remember, when you're ready to talk, my offer stands. Don't wait too long, though. Opportunities have a way of slipping away." As the SUV disappeared into the distance, the team was left with a chilling sense of unease. That evening, the team gathered around a fire pit near the test site, the events of the day weighing heavily on their minds. "They're scared," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. "Sinclair wouldn't send someone like Ward if they weren't worried about what we're doing." Michael nodded. "That means we're on the right track. But it also means they'll stop at nothing to shut us down." Amanda looked at Jimmy. "What do we do now?" Jimmy stared into the flames, his jaw set. "We keep going. No matter what they throw at us, we finish this. And when we're ready, we take the fight to them." Elon raised his glass, his voice calm but resolute. "To perseverance, and to proving them wrong." The team joined him, their spirits bolstered by the renewed sense of purpose. The day after Christopher Ward's visit, the team awoke to find their project at the center of a growing media frenzy. Headlines splashed across major outlets speculated about Solar Nexus, Elon Musk's mysterious initiative, and the brewing rivalry between Tesla and Sinclair Energy. Elon, this doesn't feel accidental, Evelyn said, scrolling through articles on her tablet during their morning briefing. Some of these reports are suspiciously detailed, like someone's feeding them information. Jimmy leaned over her shoulder to read one particularly damning headline. Tesla's solar gamble. Overhyped tech or industry disruption? Amanda frowned. They're planting seeds of doubt. If Sinclair controls the narrative, they could undermine public support before we even launch. Elon folded his arms, his expression unreadable. Let them talk. The more they speculate, the more attention we get. The truth will outshine their lies. Evelyn wasn't convinced. We can't just let them dictate the narrative. We need to go on the offensive, control the story before it controls us. Elon nodded thoughtfully. You're right. Jimmy, you've got the most personal stake in this. How would you feel about telling your story? Jimmy hesitated, caught off guard. You mean, go public? Evelyn chimed in, her tone encouraging. Think about it. You're the heart of this project, a homeless veteran working to create something transformative. It's the kind of story people root for. Jimmy rubbed the back of his neck, unsure. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the idea of opening up to the public made him uneasy. Amanda placed a hand on his arm. You don't have to do it alone. We'll all support you. And honestly, the world could use a story like yours right now. After a long pause, Jimmy nodded. All right, let's do it. But on one condition, it has to be real. No fluff, no spin, just the truth. A week later, Jimmy found himself sitting across from Sarah Chambers, a journalist known for her in-depth, human-centered reporting. The interview took place in a sunlit Tesla facility, with the gleaming Solar Nexus prototype in the background. Sarah began gently. Jimmy, your story is remarkable. A decorated Marine who fell on hard times, now working alongside Elon Musk to revolutionize renewable energy. How did you end up here? Jimmy took a deep breath. After leaving the military, I struggled to adjust to civilian life. PTSD, unemployment, it all piled up. I lost everything, my home, my family. For a while, I didn't see a way out. He glanced at Elon, who gave him an encouraging nod. But then I met Elon. He didn't just give me a job, he gave me a purpose. Working on Solar Nexus isn't just about technology for me. It's about redemption. Proving that even when life knocks you down, you can still fight back. Sarah leaned forward, her tone empathetic. What does this project mean to you personally? Jimmy's voice grew firm. It's hope. For people like me, for the planet, for the future. It's proof that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way to make a difference. The interview aired that evening, and the response was immediate. Social media exploded with messages of support for Jimmy and the Solar Nexus team. Hashtags like #SolarNexus, #JimmyHarris, and #FutureOfEnergy began trending nationwide. One tweet read, if Jimmy Harris can rebuild his life and help change the world, so can we. Proud to support Solar Nexus. Others weren't as kind. Sinclair loyalists and skeptics accused the team of using a sob story to deflect from technical flaws. Jimmy chose to focus on the positive. Let them say what they want. The people who matter, the ones we're doing this for, they understand. Sinclair wasn't about to let Tesla dominate the headlines. Within days, they launched a smear campaign targeting both the project and Jimmy personally. Articles surfaced questioning his military record, while others claimed the Solar Nexus system was nothing more than an expensive PR stunt. They're getting desperate, Amanda said, scrolling through the hit pieces. This isn't even good propaganda. It's just noise. Evelyn disagreed. Noise can still be dangerous if people listen to it. We need to counter this. Elon stepped in. We will. But not with words. We'll let the tech speak for itself. Amanda, how close are we to scheduling a live demo? Amanda grinned. Closer than you think. The team decided to host a public demonstration of the Solar Nexus system in Las Vegas, a city known for its massive energy consumption. The plan was simple yet ambitious. Power a section of the Las Vegas Strip using only Solar Nexus for an entire night. This isn't just about proving Sinclair wrong, Jimmy said during a planning session. It's about showing the world what's possible. Evelyn nodded. And if it works, there's no way they can deny us. As the team prepared for the demo, tensions ran high. The sabotage threats hadn't disappeared, and they knew Sinclair wouldn't sit idly by. To mitigate risks, Elon brought in additional security and implemented stricter access protocols. He also enlisted SpaceX engineers to assist with backup power systems, ensuring the demo wouldn't fail even under extreme circumstances. For Jimmy, the pressure was personal. He spent long nights reviewing every detail of the system, refusing to leave anything to chance. Evelyn often found him in the lab at midnight, a cup of cold coffee beside him and blueprints spread across the table. "You need sleep, you know," she said one night, handing him a fresh cup. Jimmy gave her a tired smile. "I'll sleep after we change the world." As the demo date approached, media attention reached a fever pitch. Supporters and detractors alike waited to see if Solar Nexus could live up to the hype. For Jimmy, it wasn't just about proving the system worked. It was about proving he could rise above his past and make a real difference. As he stood on the rooftop of the test site the night before the demo, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, he felt a quiet determination settle over him. "This is it," he said to himself. "Time to show them what we're made of." The streets of Las Vegas buzzed with excitement as the Solar Nexus demonstration drew nearer. For weeks, the project had dominated the headlines, some people hopeful, others skeptical. But now, with the demo just hours away, the eyes of the world were firmly on Tesla's latest gamble. Jimmy stood in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, surveying the area where they would run their live test. Towering hotels loomed around him, neon signs casting colorful reflections on the pavement. He could feel the pulse of the city, loud, chaotic, and alive. "Everything's set," Michael said, walking up with a tablet in hand. "Power grid stable, and the solar arrays are at full capacity. We're good to go." Amanda followed behind, checking her own set of screens. "We've got backup systems in place. The energy flow is being monitored in real time. If anything goes wrong, we'll be able to react instantly." But there was still a palpable tension in the air. Every team member knew this wasn't just a tech demo. It was a high-stakes moment. If the Solar Nexus system worked as intended, it would prove that Elon's vision, and their hard work, could change the future of energy. But if it failed, the damage would be irreparable. Elon approached, his usual calm demeanor intact. "Jimmy," he said, clasping him on the shoulder, "you've done everything you can. Now it's just time to let the tech speak for itself." Jimmy gave a tight smile, though the nerves were visible in his eyes. "It's not just the tech, Elon. It's about showing people that anything is possible. We're fighting for more than just clean energy." Elon nodded, his eyes flashing with understanding. "I know, and you've got this." By 5 p.m., the test site was crowded with journalists, photographers, and even some Sinclair representatives who had managed to sneak in under the guise of observers. Cameras flashed as they set up for the grand unveiling. Rebecca was busy coordinating with security, ensuring no one was able to tamper with any of the equipment. "We can't afford any surprises," she said, her voice sharp with focus. "This is as much about optics as it is about the tech." Evelyn, standing next to her, was watching the crowd. "This is bigger than I thought. They'll be analyzing every second. We need everything to go smoothly." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the atmosphere shifted from anticipation to suspense. The countdown had officially begun. With the sun setting, the demo kicked off. The Solar Nexus system began powering up, its sleek panels absorbing the last rays of daylight. Slowly, as the first few lights along the strip flickered to life, a ripple of excitement spread through the crowd. The connected grid hummed with energy, and for the first time in history, a section of one of the most energy-hungry cities in the world was being powered entirely by solar energy. "The panels are performing above expectations," Amanda reported, her voice steady. "We're at 100% efficiency, and the storage systems are fully charging." Jimmy stood with his arms crossed, watching the lights intensify. It was working. It was really working. Then, as night fell, the real test began. A surge of energy, designed to simulate the peak demand of a Las Vegas night, was introduced into the grid. The lights of the strip brightened as the power surge ran through the solar nexus system. The crowd held its breath. Would it hold? Seconds passed, feeling like hours. The system absorbed the surge without a hitch. The lights on the strip blazed brighter than ever before. It was as if the energy from the solar panels was just endless. Then, just as the demo seemed to be flawless, a sudden crackling sound came from the audio system. The crowd turned toward the source. A man in a suit, accompanied by 2 bodyguards, had pushed his way past the security barriers. Jimmy recognized him immediately. Christopher Ward. "Sorry, I couldn't resist," Ward said with a smug grin. "It's a shame to see such a noble experiment fail in front of a live audience." Elon stepped forward, his voice cool but firm. "What are you doing here, Ward?" "Just here to remind everyone that innovation requires more than just ambition. It requires real-world solutions. You can't build a future on the hopes of an underfunded project." Jimmy clenched his fists. "This is real. We've already proven it." Ward smiled, eyeing the crowd. "We'll see how real it is when the system goes down. I've got a few adjustments I think will help, just to keep things interesting." As Ward spoke, Jimmy noticed something in the man's hand. It was small, a device about the size of a cell phone. Was it a disruptor? Elon turned to his team. "Rebecca, Michael, secure the perimeter. Don't let anyone near the system." But it was too late. The device in Ward's hand was already pulsing. At first, the lights flickered, a subtle stutter in the grid. The solar nexus system had been designed to handle such anomalies, but this felt different. The power grid began to hum erratically. The surge meter spiked. "Not again," Amanda whispered, her fingers flying across the controls. Ward's smile grew wider. "Let's see if your tech can really handle the pressure, shall we?" The system began to stutter more aggressively now, the lights on the strip flickering wildly. "Everyone stay calm," Elon called, his voice echoing over the crowd. "This is just a minor glitch. Amanda, I need you to isolate the cause." For the next few tense moments, it was all hands on deck. Jimmy watched as Amanda worked furiously to track the interference, her eyes darting between the screens. "It's him. He's hacking into the system. I've got to shut it down before it causes permanent damage." With a decisive swipe, Amanda cut off Ward's access to the system, but not before he'd caused significant disruptions. The lights across the strip flickered one final time before stabilizing. The crowd let out a collective sigh of relief, but the damage had been done. Ward had injected doubt into the hearts of many. Ward, looking furious but undeterred, was escorted off the premises by security. As he left, he turned to Elon. "This isn't over. You'll see. The future of energy isn't in your hands." Elon's expression was one of quiet determination. "It's not about who's got the power now, Ward. It's about who can build something that lasts." Jimmy turned to Amanda, a sense of pride growing inside him. "It wasn't perfect, but we did it." Amanda smiled, exhaustion etched on her face. "We're not done yet, but we're closer than we've ever been." As the team packed up, media crews swarmed to get a statement, eager to hear the reaction to Sinclair's sabotage attempt. Jimmy, feeling the weight of the day's events, addressed the cameras. "We've shown what's possible. We've taken the first step toward a cleaner, brighter future. And we won't let anyone stop us now." Elon stood beside him, nodding. "This is just the beginning." The world may have doubted them, but Jimmy Harris and his team knew that they had just changed the game for good. In the days following the Las Vegas demonstration, the media circus surrounding Solar Nexus reached new heights. The sabotage attempt by Christopher Ward had only fueled the fire. Headlines alternated between praise for the technology's success and doubts about its stability. But one thing was clear. Solar Nexus was a name that everyone knew. For Jimmy, however, the aftermath wasn't just about dealing with the media or Sinclair's underhanded tactics. It was personal. The demonstration had been his moment to prove not just to the world, but to himself, that he could make a difference. And now, with the world watching, it was time to navigate the storm that had followed. One morning, as Jimmy was reviewing a flood of emails from supporters and critics alike, he received an unexpected call. "Jimmy, it's Christopher Ward. I'd like to have a conversation." The voice on the other end was smooth, calculated, just like Ward. Jimmy's stomach tightened, but he kept his cool. What do you want, Ward? I think we can help each other, Ward said. You're in a tough spot right now. You're facing a lot of pressure, but I can offer you something, insight. I know what you're up against. Jimmy frowned. You think I'm going to fall for that? You've done enough already. Ward chuckled. I'm offering you a way to win. Think about it. I know you don't trust me, but you're going to need allies. We both know Sinclair's influence is far-reaching. Jimmy hung up, shaking his head. Ward's words still lingered in his mind, like a seed that refused to be shaken loose. Was it desperation or opportunity? He wasn't sure. But he couldn't ignore the fact that Sinclair's presence in the energy industry was powerful, and they weren't going to give up easily. Despite the media frenzy and sabotage attempts, the Solar Nexus team had rallied together. But as the pressure mounted, cracks began to show in their unity. Amanda and Evelyn had always been the pillars of support within the team, but even they felt the strain. We can't keep running on fumes, Evelyn said one evening as she reviewed the project timelines. The media pressure is unrelenting. If we don't scale up production soon, we're going to lose momentum. Elon, ever the optimist, had confidence in their ability to overcome the odds. We don't need to rush this. We need to get it right. But Jimmy saw the toll it was taking on the team. He felt the weight of their hopes and dreams. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about people. And he knew that the team needed more than just technical solutions. They needed leadership, guidance, and, most of all, hope. After days of avoiding Ward's offer, Jimmy finally agreed to meet him. The location was discreet, an upscale hotel suite, tucked away in a corner of the city. Ward greeted him with his usual smug smile. Glad you decided to join me, Ward said, offering Jimmy a drink. I think you'll find this conversation beneficial. Jimmy declined the drink, his eyes narrowing. What's this really about, Ward? Ward didn't waste time. Let's cut to the chase. I have the resources to make Solar Nexus a success. But more importantly, I have the contacts, people who can get you through the regulatory hurdles, the financial roadblocks, and the supply chain issues you're facing. Jimmy felt the temptation pull at him. What if Sinclair was the key to breaking through the barriers that were slowing them down? What if Ward's help could take Solar Nexus to the next level? You've already caused enough damage, Jimmy said firmly. I don't trust you, and I'm not going to sell out to Sinclair. Not now, not ever. Ward's smile faltered for the briefest moment. It's not about trust, Jimmy. It's about survival. You can keep fighting this uphill battle, but I'm offering you a way to win. Jimmy stood up, shaking his head. I'm not interested. You can keep your help. Ward's eyes darkened, but he remained calm. You'll regret this, Jimmy. There's more at stake than you realize. Later that night, as Jimmy reflected on his conversation with Ward, a sense of clarity washed over him. He couldn't compromise his values. Solar Nexus wasn't just about changing the world with clean energy. It was about doing it the right way. The following day, Elon gathered the team for a meeting. The pressure of the past few weeks had been wearing on everyone, and it was time to make a bold move. We've been playing defense long enough, Elon began. It's time to take the fight to Sinclair. They want to play dirty, fine. But we've got something they can't beat. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes sharp. And what's that? Us. Our story. Our mission. The world isn't going to buy their lies. Not when they see what we're doing here. We're going to push forward, no matter what. We need to show the world that Solar Nexus isn't just a company, it's a movement. With the team's resolve solidified, Elon made the call. They would hold a press conference, not just to defend Solar Nexus, but to redefine what the company stood for. It wasn't just about solar power. It was about empowering people, giving them a chance to be part of something bigger. The press conference was set for the following week, and as the day approached, the team prepared a bold new campaign. They would showcase not only their tech but the heart and soul behind it, the stories of the people who were working tirelessly to make Solar Nexus a reality. Let's show the world who we really are, Jimmy said, his voice filled with conviction. And let's make it clear that no one can stop us. The venue was packed with reporters, camera crews, and influential industry figures. As the event kicked off, Elon took the stage first, outlining the vision of Solar Nexus and its potential to revolutionize energy across the globe. But it was when Jimmy took the mic that the room fell silent. "I don't have a technical speech prepared," he began, "but I do have a story. It's a story about second chances, about fighting for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you." He told the audience about his journey, from the chaos of military life to the struggles of homelessness, and how Solar Nexus gave him a purpose again. He spoke not just about the technology, but about what it meant for people who felt they had nowhere else to turn. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. There was no denying the power of his words. The press conference was a resounding success. The public, moved by Jimmy's story, began rallying behind Solar Nexus. Social media buzzed with support, and influencers started to share their own stories of hope and redemption alongside the company's mission. The momentum was shifting. Sinclair may have been powerful, but Solar Nexus had something they couldn't replicate: authenticity. As Jimmy stood backstage, watching the news coverage, he felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. He had made the right choice, and now, the world was beginning to believe in their vision. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: Solar Nexus was no longer just a company. It was a movement. The following weeks were a whirlwind of media interviews, social media campaigns, and public appearances. Solar Nexus had become more than just a groundbreaking project. It was now a symbol of resilience, hope, and the possibility of a brighter future. But despite the overwhelming support from the public, the company's internal struggles were far from over. The pressure to deliver on the promises of the Las Vegas demonstration had only intensified. The team was working around the clock, trying to scale up operations and meet the growing demand for their technology. Amanda and Michael, who had been integral in the system's design and testing, found themselves at odds over the next phase of development. Michael, ever the pragmatist, argued that they needed to focus on efficiency and speed. "We can't afford to keep perfecting this," Michael said during one heated meeting. "People want results now. We've already shown that the system works, but we need to get more units out there." Amanda, always the perfectionist, disagreed. "If we rush this, we'll lose the integrity of the system. We need to ensure every installation meets the highest standards, or we risk destroying our credibility." Jimmy watched the two argue, feeling the weight of the situation. He knew they were both right in their own ways. The company couldn't afford to sit back and relax, but they also couldn't afford to sacrifice quality for speed. As the team wrestled with their internal debates, the pressure from Sinclair continued to grow. Christopher Ward's words from their private meeting kept echoing in Jimmy's mind. Ward's influence, both financial and political, was vast. No matter how much momentum Solar Nexus gained, Sinclair had the power to pull the strings behind the scenes. It was during one of these internal struggles that an unexpected ally emerged: Rebecca. She had been relatively quiet for weeks, focused on security and logistics, but now she stepped forward with a proposal that took everyone by surprise. "I've been thinking about this," Rebecca began, her eyes scanning the room. "We've been fighting Sinclair head-on, but that's a losing battle. What if we flipped the script? What if we went straight to the people who matter most? Regulators, lawmakers, the people who shape policy." The room fell silent. "You're suggesting a political strategy?" Jimmy asked, leaning forward. Rebecca nodded. "Yes. Solar Nexus is more than just a company. It's a movement. We need to build a coalition of supporters, people who understand the importance of what we're doing. If we can win over policymakers and regulators, we can make Sinclair irrelevant." Elon, who had been listening quietly, broke his silence. "I like this. We've already proved that the tech works. Now it's time to make sure the system is protected by the people who can change the rules." Jimmy felt a surge of excitement. It was bold, but it was exactly what they needed. Over the next several weeks, Solar Nexus began to ramp up its lobbying efforts. Rebecca spearheaded the campaign, leveraging her connections and contacts in Washington to arrange meetings with key lawmakers and industry leaders. They made it clear that Solar Nexus wasn't just a tech company. It was a social movement that could transform the energy industry for the better. It wasn't an easy fight. There were roadblocks at every turn. Many politicians, swayed by Sinclair's deep pockets, were initially resistant. But Rebecca and the team persisted. They highlighted the job creation potential of Solar Nexus, the environmental benefits, and the opportunity for energy independence. Slowly but surely, their message began to resonate. Meanwhile, the press continued to cover the company's progress. The narrative was shifting in their favor, as more and more stories emerged about the positive impact Solar Nexus was having on communities across the country. But just as things seemed to be turning around for Solar Nexus, Sinclair made its move. Christopher Ward, never one to back down, launched a series of aggressive media campaigns attacking Solar Nexus. The strategy was clear: discredit the company before it could gain too much political traction. Ward's attacks were relentless. He accused Solar Nexus of being an untested, risky venture, and claimed that the public's support was based on emotional appeal rather than facts. He used his influence to seed doubts about the technology's long-term viability. For a brief moment, it seemed like the tide had turned against them. News outlets began to report on the controversy surrounding the project. Sinclair's smear campaign seemed to be working. It was at this low point that Jimmy knew they had to make a stand, not just in boardrooms and political offices, but in the hearts and minds of the public. He called for an emergency team meeting. "We can't let this go on. Sinclair is playing dirty, but we can't play by their rules. We need to get in front of this. We need to own the narrative." Elon, as always, had a clear vision. "Jimmy's right. This is the time to show everyone what we're about. We've been humble for too long. Let's go on the offensive." The plan was simple but bold. Jimmy would appear in a live broadcast, answering questions directly from the public. It was a risk, but it was one that they had to take. "We'll show them that this is bigger than just a company," Jimmy said. "This is about giving people power, real, sustainable power. And we're not backing down." The day of the live broadcast arrived. The tension was palpable, as millions tuned in from across the country. The cameras focused on Jimmy, standing confidently in front of a crowd of supporters. He was flanked by Amanda, Elon, and the rest of the team, all standing together. "Thank you for joining us today," Jimmy began, his voice strong. "I'm here to set the record straight. Solar Nexus isn't just a company, it's a promise. A promise that the future of energy belongs to the people, not corporations, not billionaires, but you, the everyday people who want to see a world powered by clean energy." "You're suggesting a political strategy?" Jimmy asked, leaning forward. Rebecca nodded. "Yes. Solar Nexus is more than just a company. It's a movement. We need to build a coalition of supporters, people who understand the importance of what we're doing. If we can win over policymakers and regulators, we can make Sinclair irrelevant." Elon, who had been listening quietly, broke his silence. "I like this. We've already proved that the tech works. Now it's time to make sure the system is protected by the people who can change the rules." Jimmy felt a surge of excitement. It was bold, but it was exactly what they needed. Over the next several weeks, Solar Nexus began to ramp up its lobbying efforts. Rebecca spearheaded the campaign, leveraging her connections and contacts in Washington to arrange meetings with key lawmakers and industry leaders. They made it clear that Solar Nexus wasn't just a tech company. It was a social movement that could transform the energy industry for the better. It wasn't an easy fight. There were roadblocks at every turn. Many politicians, swayed by Sinclair's deep pockets, were initially resistant. But Rebecca and the team persisted. They highlighted the job creation potential of Solar Nexus, the environmental benefits, and the opportunity for energy independence. Slowly but surely, their message began to resonate. Meanwhile, the press continued to cover the company's progress. The narrative was shifting in their favor, as more and more stories emerged about the positive impact Solar Nexus was having on communities across the country. But just as things seemed to be turning around for Solar Nexus, Sinclair made its move. Christopher Ward, never one to back down, launched a series of aggressive media campaigns attacking Solar Nexus. The strategy was clear: discredit the company before it could gain too much political traction. Ward's attacks were relentless. He accused Solar Nexus of being an untested, risky venture, and claimed that the public's support was based on emotional appeal rather than facts. He used his influence to seed doubts about the technology's long-term viability. For a brief moment, it seemed like the tide had turned against them. News outlets began to report on the controversy surrounding the project. Sinclair's smear campaign seemed to be working. It was at this low point that Jimmy knew they had to make a stand, not just in boardrooms and political offices, but in the hearts and minds of the public. He called for an emergency team meeting. We can't let this go on. Sinclair is playing dirty, but we can't play by their rules. We need to get in front of this. We need to own the narrative. Elon, as always, had a clear vision. Jimmy's right. This is the time to show everyone what we're about. We've been humble for too long. Let's go on the offensive. The plan was simple but bold. Jimmy would appear in a live broadcast, answering questions directly from the public. It was a risk, but it was one that they had to take. We'll show them that this is bigger than just a company, Jimmy said. This is about giving people power, real, sustainable power. And we're not backing down. The day of the live broadcast arrived. The tension was palpable as millions tuned in from across the country. The cameras focused on Jimmy, standing confidently in front of a crowd of supporters. He was flanked by Amanda, Elon, and the rest of the team, all standing together. Thank you for joining us today, Jimmy began, his voice strong. I'm here to set the record straight. Solar Nexus isn't just a company, it's a promise. A promise that the future of energy belongs to the people, not corporations, not billionaires, but you, the everyday people who want to see a world powered by clean energy. He paused, allowing his words to settle in. We've had our share of challenges, but we're not afraid of a fight. Sinclair can try to tear us down with their money and power, but we have something they can't buy, the truth. The crowd erupted into applause. For every person who believes in this vision, Jimmy continued, we stand with you. Together, we can change the world. And no one, not Sinclair, not anyone, will stand in our way. The broadcast was a resounding success. Social media exploded with support for Solar Nexus as people rallied behind Jimmy's message. The smear campaign had backfired. People were tired of the corporate greed that had dominated the energy industry for so long. With the public on their side, Solar Nexus gained new traction in Washington. Key lawmakers, inspired by the movement behind the company, began to push for legislation that would support clean energy initiatives. The tide was turning in their favor, and for the first time in weeks, Jimmy felt a real sense of hope. But he knew the battle was far from over. Sinclair was a formidable opponent, and they wouldn't back down without a fight. But with the public on their side, Solar Nexus had a real chance of winning. The winds of change were blowing, and Solar Nexus was ready to ride them to victory. The storm had passed, but the horizon was far from clear. Although Solar Nexus had successfully weathered the initial backlash from Sinclair's media blitz, the road ahead was filled with challenges that would require more than just public support. It would take unity, innovation, and a willingness to fight for what was right. In the days following the live broadcast, the response had been overwhelming. Solar Nexus' mission had resonated with the public on a deep level. The media was still buzzing, but now the tone had changed. People were no longer just talking about the technology. They were talking about the values behind it, transparency, integrity, and the belief that everyone had the right to access clean, sustainable energy. The team had rallied around Jimmy's vision, and with that support, they began to ramp up their efforts. The logistics team, under Rebecca's leadership, worked tirelessly to secure new supply chains to meet the growing demand. The engineering team was refining the technology, making it more efficient and scalable, while Michael and Amanda led the charge on optimizing the production process. Elon's strategic brain was constantly on the move, laying out plans to expand the company's influence, both in terms of market reach and political sway. It was time to take things to the next level. But even as the momentum continued to build, Jimmy knew they needed to do more than just push back against Sinclair. They had to outpace them. If they didn't, the opposition would eventually find a way to outmuscle them. One morning, after a long strategy session, Jimmy pulled the team together. His expression was resolute, but there was an undeniable spark of excitement in his eyes. We've been playing defense for too long, he said. Now, it's time to make a bold move. The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to Jimmy. What do you mean? Evelyn asked, the leader of the marketing team, always ready to engage in the next big idea. We've got the public on our side. Now, we need to expand our reach in a way that's impossible for Sinclair to ignore. Let's push harder into the government sector, get the support of local and state governments. We need to make our technology the default energy solution for public projects. Amanda's eyes lit up. That's brilliant. If we can lock down a few major contracts for city buildings, schools, hospitals, and government complexes, it will force the hand of larger corporations to take us seriously. Jimmy nodded. Exactly. And it's not just about the contracts. It's about creating a network of cities and regions that believe in the same vision. It's about the power of unity. Over the next several weeks, Solar Nexus launched an ambitious campaign focused on public engagement. The goal was to get more people involved in the clean energy movement, not just as customers, but as active participants in shaping the future of energy. They encouraged people to reach out to their local government representatives and demand that solar energy be integrated into public infrastructure. The campaign went viral. Across social media platforms, people shared their own stories of wanting to see cleaner energy in their communities. Activists, environmental groups, and concerned citizens rallied behind the cause. Jimmy even held town halls, where he spoke directly to the people, answering their questions and listening to their concerns. "We're not just creating a product," Jimmy told them at one of the town halls. "We're creating a movement that will empower communities to take control of their energy future." As the campaign gained momentum, local governments began taking notice. Several smaller cities in California, Colorado, and Oregon signed agreements to pilot Solar Nexus installations in public buildings, and the company's reputation grew. As expected, the political tide was beginning to turn in their favor. But with this success came new resistance. Sinclair wasn't going to let go of its stranglehold on the energy market so easily. Christopher Ward, sensing his company's control slipping, began ramping up his efforts to block any legislation that would favor Solar Nexus. He used his considerable political influence to lobby against the incentives that were beginning to appear for renewable energy. Ward's PR machine worked overtime, attempting to discredit Solar Nexus once again, this time claiming that their technology wasn't economically viable for large-scale infrastructure projects. But this time, Solar Nexus wasn't alone. Several of their new allies, including environmental advocacy groups and local government officials, began pushing back against Sinclair's influence. The battle had become more than just a corporate rivalry. It was a fight for the future of energy, for the health of the planet, and for the livelihoods of those who had long been neglected by big oil and gas companies. As Solar Nexus prepared to launch its biggest campaign yet, an unexpected crisis hit. One of the major installations, in a government building in Denver, faced a significant technical malfunction. The entire energy grid went offline for several hours, leaving the building without power. While the incident was swiftly contained and repairs were made, the media quickly latched onto the story. Sinclair, eager to exploit the situation, seized the opportunity to attack. They claimed that Solar Nexus technology was unreliable and unsafe. The headlines were explosive: Solar Nexus fails in major test, and is Solar Nexus really ready for the big time? The media frenzy threatened to undo all the positive momentum the company had built. In the face of this crisis, Jimmy knew he had to act fast. The first step was to hold a press conference, one that would address the incident directly and take ownership of the situation. He called a team meeting to prepare. "We're not going to run from this," Jimmy said, his voice steady. "We made a mistake, and we're going to fix it. But I want everyone to remember this. We've never been about perfection. We've been about progress. And progress means learning from our mistakes and getting better." Elon agreed. "The truth is, we've had way more successes than failures. One issue isn't going to undo all the good work we've done. We need to remind the world why we're doing this in the first place." The press conference was scheduled within 24 hours. Jimmy took the stage, facing the sea of reporters, cameras flashing. "We're here today because something went wrong," Jimmy began. "But what we've learned is just as important as the technology itself. We're committed to learning, improving, and ensuring this doesn't happen again. The future of energy is about creating a system that works for everyone, and that includes learning from our setbacks." He took a deep breath, pausing to let the gravity of his words sink in. "We are committed to making this right, and we will not back down." The media's tone shifted. Rather than focusing on the failure, the story became about Solar Nexus' commitment to transparency and accountability. It wasn't long before public opinion began to swing back in their favor. People admired Jimmy's willingness to admit mistakes and his unrelenting focus on improvement. The episode in Denver became a turning point for Solar Nexus. While Sinclair had used their influence to cause damage, it was Solar Nexus' unity, determination, and ability to learn from failure that ultimately carried them through. The people had rallied behind them, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. The government contracts continued to grow, and with each new partnership, the company's influence in the energy sector grew stronger. They had earned the trust of the people, and now it was time to take that trust and turn it into real, lasting change. Jimmy knew that the battle was far from over, but as he stood alongside his team, watching the results of their work unfold, he couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of hope. Solar Nexus wasn't just a company. It was a movement, and together, they would change the world. With the momentum Solar Nexus had built, it seemed like there was no stopping them. However, as their influence continued to grow, so did the efforts of their rivals. Sinclair Energy had become desperate, and its tactics were growing more aggressive. The corporate war between Solar Nexus and Sinclair was about to reach new heights. Sinclair's attacks had shifted from media campaigns to behind-the-scenes tactics. Jimmy had known from the beginning that Sinclair would stop at nothing to protect its dominance in the energy sector, but the extent to which they would go now took everyone by surprise. It started with an anonymous leak to the press, which claimed that several key members of the Solar Nexus team had been involved in unethical business practices. The leak was carefully crafted, too carefully, in fact. It was clear that someone within the company was working against them. The allegations were severe: bribery, misrepresentation of data, and violations of environmental regulations. At first, Solar Nexus's legal team was confident they could disprove the claims, but the story spread like wildfire. The media was quick to report on the scandal, and social media platforms were flooded with rumors and speculation. Jimmy stood in the war room, surrounded by Amanda, Elon, Rebecca, and Michael, each one clearly shaken by the news. "Do you think it's Sinclair behind this?" Amanda asked, her voice tight with concern. "It has their fingerprints all over it," Jimmy replied, pacing the room. "They're using their usual playbook. First, discredit us publicly. Then, try to turn our allies against us." Elon's face darkened. "This is a full-out corporate war now. If they're willing to leak false information, they'll stop at nothing to make us look bad." "We need to track the source of the leak," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "We can't let this stand." Despite the mounting pressure, Jimmy remained determined to fight back. He knew that their greatest strength was the transparency they had built from the beginning. This was no time to hide in the shadows. If they were going to survive this onslaught, they needed to expose the truth and rally the public once again. "We can't let this ruin everything we've worked for," Jimmy said. "We need to go on the offensive. We need to show the world that Solar Nexus is committed to integrity." The team quickly got to work. They organized a press conference in which Jimmy would address the allegations head-on. The focus was clear. They would not shy away from the controversy. Instead, they would lay out the facts and prove the falsehoods of the accusations. "We're not going to let a smear campaign tear us down," Jimmy said, as he stood in front of his team. "We've built this company on a foundation of honesty and integrity. That's what we'll show the world." The press conference was one of the most tense moments in the company's history. The media was ready to pounce, and the public was waiting for answers. Jimmy stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding. This was their chance to take control of the narrative. "Good afternoon," Jimmy began, his voice calm but resolute. "Today, we're here to set the record straight." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. The room was silent. "We are fully aware of the allegations that have been made against our company," Jimmy continued. "And let me be clear, we categorically deny them. These claims are baseless, fabricated, and part of an ongoing campaign to discredit everything we've worked for." He took a deep breath before continuing. "But we understand why people may be concerned. In the past, the energy industry has been filled with companies that put profits above people, that manipulate the system for their own gain. But that's not who we are. That's never been who we are." Jimmy paused, letting the words settle in. "We've always believed that the future of energy is clean, sustainable, and most importantly fair. And we stand by that commitment. We've opened our doors to the public, to regulators, and to independent auditors. Everything we do is transparent, and we will continue to prove that we are a company that operates with the highest ethical standards." The crowd was still. Jimmy knew they were listening. "We've already reached out to the appropriate authorities to investigate the source of these allegations," he continued, "and we will hold those responsible accountable. We will not let anyone drag our name through the mud without facing the consequences. But let's be clear, this isn't just about defending our company. It's about defending the people who believe in what we're doing." Jimmy's eyes scanned the room. "This is about all of us. It's about fighting for a future where energy is accessible, affordable, and clean. And we will not be deterred. We will stand tall, and we will continue to build the future we've promised." The press conference had the desired effect. Instead of further undermining Solar Nexus, Jimmy's words brought a sense of calm and confidence to the public. The media outlets that had initially reported the scandal began to question the veracity of the claims. People took to social media to express their support, rallying behind the company's commitment to transparency. The smear campaign began to lose steam. As more details emerged about the falsehoods behind the leak, the public's trust in Solar Nexus only grew. But the battle wasn't over. Sinclair was still powerful, and they were likely to escalate their efforts. Jimmy knew they needed to keep their guard up. But for now, the tide had turned. As the media storm began to settle, Jimmy and his team knew the fight was far from over. They couldn't afford to let up. Sinclair was going to strike again, and they needed to be ready. "I think we've proven that we can handle the heat," Amanda said one evening as they debriefed in the conference room. "But now we need to focus on the next phase. We can't just defend ourselves forever." Jimmy nodded. "We need to go on the offensive. We need to make Sinclair look like the corporate giant they are, one that's trying to suppress clean energy and keep the status quo. The public is ready for change. Let's give them what they've been waiting for." Elon leaned forward. "Let's make this personal. We've been fighting for the future of energy. It's time we start showing the world what Sinclair is really about." With their internal confidence renewed, the team began planning their next move. They would take the fight directly to Sinclair, not just on the corporate front, but on the political stage as well. They would expose the lengths Sinclair was willing to go to protect its monopoly, and they would show the world that Solar Nexus wasn't just another energy company, it was the future. The corporate war was far from over, but Solar Nexus had made one thing clear. They weren't just fighting for profits. They were fighting for the future of the planet, and they were willing to go to any lengths to win. After the dust had settled from the recent media attack, Solar Nexus was more determined than ever to shift the narrative. But as Jimmy and his team knew all too well, public perception was as fragile as it was powerful. They had fought back against Sinclair's smear campaign, but now it was time for Solar Nexus to take the next step. They had to ensure that the public would not only forgive the company's past challenges, but come to believe in their vision for a better, sustainable future. Despite their victories in handling the leaks and the press conference, Sinclair Energy was still playing their cards. They had far more resources, a vast PR team, and connections in high places. They weren't going to back down quietly. If anything, they were doubling down on their efforts to discredit Solar Nexus. One morning, Jimmy walked into the conference room, already aware that another round of negative articles had just hit the press. The tone was subtle this time, a strategic shift from direct accusations to more indirect insinuations. The media was framing Solar Nexus as a company that was too ambitious and too eager to disrupt, implying that their drive for progress might be pushing them too far too fast. Rebecca was the first to speak, already reading the new articles. "They're positioning us as reckless, like we're too green and too idealistic to succeed at this scale," she said, rubbing her eyes in frustration. "They're framing this as a battle between idealism and practicality." Michael leaned forward. "And that's the narrative we need to fight. If we don't counter this with a more grounded, practical approach, the public might start to question if we can deliver on our promises." Elon, as always, had a different perspective. "It's a smear, plain and simple. But the only way to beat it is to put out an even stronger, clearer message about what we're doing. Let's double down on how we're changing lives, improving communities, and building a cleaner future. We need to show the world that we're not just a tech company, we're a movement." It was clear that Solar Nexus needed to push back harder, but this time, They needed a strategy that not only responded to Sinclair's attacks, but also reinforced their core values in a way that would truly resonate with the public. "We can't just be reactive," Jimmy said, his voice calm but firm. "We've got to turn this around into an opportunity. People need to understand that we're not just about technology. We're about giving people power. Not just electricity, but the power to control their own future." That was the turning point. The team began to develop a new campaign, one that would focus on empowering communities, not just selling solar panels. They would highlight the stories of individuals, families, and local governments who had benefited from Solar Nexus solutions. This would show the human impact behind their mission, moving beyond the technology and focusing on real-world change. "We need to put faces to our cause," Amanda said, her eyes bright with the idea. "Not just numbers and statistics, but real people who are living the change." The new campaign was called Power to the People, and its aim was simple: to showcase how Solar Nexus was putting control over energy back into the hands of everyday people. They would feature stories of veterans, teachers, farmers, and families who had benefited from Solar Nexus technology and the communities that were thriving as a result. The launch of the campaign was timed perfectly. Just as the press coverage from Sinclair began to intensify, Solar Nexus debuted a series of emotional ads featuring people from all walks of life. A retired Navy veteran who had seen his electric bills drop to almost nothing. A small-town mayor who had saved millions by investing in Solar Nexus energy solutions for his town's public buildings. A mother of 3 whose neighborhood had switched to solar and now powered their homes without relying on the grid. The ads went viral, and for the first time, Solar Nexus wasn't just a company. It was a movement, a force of change that was bringing real, tangible improvements to people's lives. The public's perception began to shift. People started to see the company as more than just a business. Solar Nexus was a solution, a hope for a better, more sustainable future that wasn't just for the elite, but for everyone. The narrative had flipped. "People are talking about us in a way they never have before," Rebecca said, watching the social media threads explode with positivity. "We're not just disrupting the energy sector. We're disrupting the way people think about what energy should be." But Sinclair wasn't ready to give up. If anything, they had learned a valuable lesson. They needed to step up their efforts. The next phase of their strategy was about undermining Solar Nexus in more subtle ways. The next move came through political lobbying. Sinclair began using their significant resources to pour money into political campaigns, specifically targeting legislators who had expressed support for renewable energy policies. They knew that if they could weaken political support for solar energy, they could sabotage the growth of companies like Solar Nexus. They began to organize a series of political ads and reports that downplayed the importance of solar energy, claiming that while it was a nice idea, it wasn't financially feasible in the long run. They painted the renewable energy movement as a fad and stressed the importance of oil and gas for national security and economic stability. It was an aggressive, multi-pronged attack, one designed to erode the political and public support that Solar Nexus had worked so hard to build. And it was working. Slowly but surely, whispers of doubt started to creep back into the media. Jimmy, however, had anticipated this kind of attack. They had already begun laying the groundwork for a new initiative to counter Sinclair's political maneuvering. They called it Energy for the Future, a series of policy proposals designed to strengthen the case for clean energy at both the local and federal levels. The campaign focused on one key message: clean energy wasn't just an environmental issue, it was a national security issue. The United States, for too long, had relied on foreign oil and gas. Solar energy and other renewable resources were not just cheaper, they were more secure. Jimmy addressed the nation in a live broadcast, using the power of the media to reach millions. "This isn't just about cleaner air," he said passionately. "This is about energy independence. This is about keeping our country safe from the volatility of the global oil market. The future of energy is here, and we need to embrace it for the security of every American." Slowly, but surely, the tide began to turn. Public opinion swung back in Solar Nexus' favor as more and more people began to see the benefits of renewable energy, not just in terms of the environment, but in terms of national security and economic growth. The Energy for the Future campaign gained traction with lawmakers, and Sinclair's political stranglehold began to loosen. One of the final blows to Sinclair's strategy came when several key members of the Senate and House publicly voiced their support for the Energy for the Future initiative. They spoke about the necessity of diversifying the nation's energy portfolio and embracing the technology that companies like SolarNexus were developing. For the first time, Sinclair was on the defensive. As SolarNexus won back its position, Jimmy reflected on everything they had overcome. They had faced corporate sabotage, political warfare, and public skepticism. But through it all, they had stayed true to their mission. "We're not just fighting for energy," Jimmy said one evening, looking out over the bustling city below. "We're fighting for the future. A future that belongs to everyone." The battle wasn't over, but the direction was clear. SolarNexus had proven that, with the right vision, determination, and unity, they could not only survive the corporate wars, they could change the world. The war for public perception had been long and hard, but SolarNexus was beginning to see the fruits of their labor. The political tide was shifting in their favor, media coverage was becoming more favorable, and the company's groundbreaking work in solar technology was starting to gain recognition on a global scale. But even as they surged forward, new challenges began to arise. Challenges that would test their resolve in ways they had never imagined. The Energy for the Future campaign was a massive success. SolarNexus was now the name on everyone's lips when it came to clean energy. People were talking about it in the streets, at dinner tables, and in political circles. Even major media outlets were publishing editorials and investigative pieces highlighting the company's impact on communities, jobs, and the environment. It was a moment of triumph, but also one of caution. Jimmy knew that just as quickly as their fortunes had turned, they could easily be knocked off course again. He wasn't about to get complacent. There was still work to be done. "I think we've finally got the momentum we need," Amanda said, as the team gathered for a meeting in the now bustling SolarNexus headquarters. "We're seeing traction on all fronts: social media, local governments, even international partnerships. But I don't think we should rest on our laurels." Elon nodded. "The competition is going to ramp up. Sinclair isn't finished, not by a long shot. We need to keep innovating, and we need to scale faster. Now's the time to push the boundaries." Rebecca, ever the strategist, had a different perspective. "I agree, but let's not forget the bigger picture. There are still people out there who don't believe in what we're doing. Our next big challenge is shifting the global narrative on energy. If we want to be the ones to define the future, we need to think beyond just the US." It was clear to the team that the next step in their journey was to take SolarNexus global. They had dominated the American market, but the energy crisis was a worldwide issue, and many countries were beginning to look for alternative solutions to fossil fuels. The global market was ripe for disruption, but it was also crowded with powerful competitors, including Sinclair Energy, international energy giants, and a host of new startups. "We can't afford to go slow," Jimmy said, as they discussed their expansion plan. "The world is changing. If we don't seize the opportunity now, others will. Let's look at countries that are most in need of clean energy, and let's offer them a solution they can't ignore." After weeks of market research and meetings with international partners, the team settled on several regions where SolarNexus could make a significant impact. South America, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa were facing immense challenges related to energy access and environmental degradation. But with the right partnerships and investments, they could change the energy landscape in these regions. It didn't take long for SolarNexus to secure its first major international deal. Through a partnership with a Brazilian energy consortium, they agreed to deploy large-scale solar panels to power communities in the Amazon region. The project was both ambitious and risky, given the logistical challenges of the region, but it also had the potential to be a game-changer for both SolarNexus and Brazil. "This is a huge win," Rebecca said, looking at the signed agreement. "If this project succeeds, we could transform the entire region's energy infrastructure." Michael, who had become increasingly involved in operations, added, "We'll need to navigate a lot of red tape, but this could open doors for us all over Latin America." Elon was already thinking about the next steps. "Let's make sure we do this right. We're not just installing solar panels, we're building trust with local communities. That means we have to be involved in their development, their growth. SolarNexus should be more than just a supplier. We need to be a partner in their success." To further solidify their position as a global leader in renewable energy, Solar Nexus planned to attend the Global Energy Forum in Geneva, a prestigious event where industry leaders, policymakers, and innovators gathered to discuss the future of energy. It was here that Jimmy would have the chance to speak directly to the most influential figures in the industry and potentially secure partnerships with governments, NGOs, and major corporations from around the world. It was a moment of truth. The team flew to Switzerland, where they were greeted with a whirlwind of meetings, panels, and discussions. Solar Nexus was everywhere, its logo on banners, its name in conversations. But the competition was fierce. Sinclair Energy had a massive presence at the event, and they weren't about to let Solar Nexus steal the spotlight. "We need to make our mark," Jimmy said, as the team prepared for the big presentation. "We've come this far. Now it's time to show the world who we really are." The main event of the forum was a keynote panel discussion, where the biggest names in energy would present their visions for the future. Jimmy was invited to speak on behalf of Solar Nexus, and he knew that this was his opportunity to change the global conversation about energy. As the panel discussion began, Jimmy found himself face-to-face with his greatest rival, Sinclair's CEO, Robert Sinclair. The two men exchanged tense handshakes as they sat on the stage. The moderator introduced the panel. "Today, we're discussing the future of energy. What role will renewables play? And how can we ensure a sustainable energy future for all?" Jimmy's heart raced as he prepared to speak. The world was watching. "Thank you for having me," Jimmy began, his voice steady. "At Solar Nexus, we believe that the future of energy isn't just about clean power. It's about giving people control over their energy futures. We're focused on providing affordable, sustainable, and accessible energy to everyone, no matter where they live or how much they earn." He paused for effect, allowing his words to sink in. The fossil fuel industry has had its time. It's a dying industry. And the longer we wait to transition to renewables, the more we'll pay for it, economically, environmentally, and socially. We're not here to make incremental changes. We're here to change the game. Robert Sinclair's turn came next, and as expected, he was quick to take shots at Solar Nexus. "We've heard a lot about idealism, but the fact is, clean energy isn't scalable without major financial investment and government support. You can't just throw technology at the problem and hope it works. It requires decades of infrastructure development, and that's something Solar Nexus hasn't even begun to address." Jimmy was ready. "We're not just throwing technology at the problem, Robert. We've already proven that we can scale clean energy. We've deployed systems in communities across the United States, and now we're going global. The infrastructure is already being built, and with the right leadership, it's only going to get better." The debate was intense, and the world took notice. Jimmy's passionate defense of Solar Nexus resonated with many in the audience. His words were picked up by major news outlets, and soon, Solar Nexus was at the center of a global conversation. But as the dust settled, Jimmy knew the fight wasn't over. He had won a battle, but the war was far from finished. There were still obstacles to overcome, and Sinclair wasn't going to let go of its stranglehold on the energy market easily. But Jimmy had something they didn't, the support of the people, and with that, he knew they could win. The victory at the Global Energy Forum had given Solar Nexus a major boost in both credibility and public support. The media coverage was overwhelming, and many investors were eager to get involved with the company's global expansion. Yet, as the momentum grew, so did the pressure. The global energy market was a complex web of regulatory challenges, political instability, and competition from entrenched energy giants. It wasn't going to be easy to turn their vision into a global reality. One of the biggest hurdles Solar Nexus faced was establishing strong international partnerships. Though they had secured deals in Brazil, Southeast Asia, and Africa, each of these regions presented unique challenges, from political corruption to logistical hurdles in remote areas. The key to scaling Solar Nexus globally is building relationships with local governments and businesses, Rebecca explained during a strategy meeting. "We need their cooperation to navigate the red tape and get our systems up and running. Without local support, we'll be fighting an uphill battle." Elon, as always, was focused on the long-term vision. "We need to think beyond partnerships. We need to become part of the fabric of these communities. Our goal isn't just to sell solar panels. It's to change the energy narrative and provide these countries with the tools they need to control their own energy futures." One of the first real tests came when Solar Nexus tried to expand into the Middle East, an area known for its reliance on oil and gas. The region was home to some of the wealthiest nations in the world, but also some of the most politically complex. Solar Nexus was not only competing with powerful local players, but also with entrenched interests who viewed renewable energy as a threat to their dominance. In Saudi Arabia, a meeting was arranged with high-ranking officials to discuss the potential for collaboration. The stakes were high. If they could secure even a small foothold in the region, it could be a game-changer for Solar Nexus. "We need to tread carefully here," Jimmy said, as the team prepared for the meeting. "The Middle East has been dependent on oil for decades. We're not just selling solar energy, we're challenging an entire way of life." Elon, though cautious, was confident. "We've faced opposition before. The key is to present solar as an opportunity, not just a solution. They need to see the value in diversifying their energy portfolio." The meeting with the Saudi officials began with an air of skepticism. The delegates were cordial but uninterested in hearing about the advantages of renewable energy. They were more focused on maintaining their country's energy dominance and protecting their lucrative oil industry. "We understand your position," Jimmy said diplomatically, "but we're not here to compete with oil. We're here to complement it. Solar energy can help you reduce your domestic energy costs, free up more oil for export, and position Saudi Arabia as a leader in the green energy space." The discussion was long and tense, with little headway made. It seemed that the kingdom's leadership wasn't yet ready to pivot toward renewable energy, at least not on the scale that Solar Nexus had in mind. But Jimmy wasn't ready to give up just yet. "We'll keep pushing," he said after the meeting. "The world is changing. Even here, they know it. It's just a matter of time." While the team celebrated their initial successes, another challenge was looming. Back in the U.S., Sinclair Energy had quietly launched a new initiative to combat the rise of solar energy. The initiative, funded by several oil and gas conglomerates, was designed to discredit Solar Nexus and slow down the adoption of renewable energy. The campaign was a direct assault on Solar Nexus's credibility, spreading misinformation about the reliability and cost-effectiveness of solar power. They funded think tanks that published reports suggesting that renewable energy was too expensive to scale and too unreliable to meet global energy needs. Amanda, frustrated by the misinformation campaign, paced around the conference room. "This isn't just about the truth. It's about public perception. If people start doubting the reliability of solar, it could derail everything we've worked for." Jimmy, as always, remained calm. "We've been through tough times before. This is just another obstacle. We need to fight back with facts. We need to show the world what Solar Nexus has accomplished, and we need to bring the public along with us." With the pressure mounting from Sinclair and other opponents, Solar Nexus decided to take a more aggressive approach. They launched an awareness campaign to debunk the myths about solar power and showcase the tangible benefits they had already delivered to communities across the U.S. Their first major ad campaign featured real-life stories of individuals and families who had transformed their lives through solar energy, communities that had previously been dependent on costly and unreliable power sources. The ads highlighted Solar Nexus's impact not only on the environment but also on people's livelihoods. The response was overwhelming. People rallied behind Solar Nexus, flooding social media with support. The hashtag #SolarForAll quickly went viral, and grassroots campaigns popped up across the country, organizing protests and petitions calling for increased investment in renewable energy. As Solar Nexus's campaign gained traction, an unexpected ally emerged in the form of former President Barack Obama. He had long been an advocate for clean energy and had spoken out about the importance of transitioning away from fossil fuels. Recognizing the growing momentum behind Solar Nexus, he offered to publicly support the company's efforts. "I've seen what Solar Nexus has done in the United States," Obama said in an interview. "They're not just talking about change, they're making it happen. They're leading the charge for a clean energy future, and it's something I wholeheartedly support." The endorsement from Obama was a game-changer. It gave Solar Nexus the kind of credibility and visibility that only a former president could provide. The media covered his endorsement extensively, and it sent a clear message to the world. Solar Nexus wasn't just another startup. It was the future of energy. As the campaign gained steam, Jimmy found himself reflecting on everything that had brought him to this point. He had always believed in the power of innovation to change the world, but he had never imagined the sacrifices it would take. The sleepless nights, the political battles, the constant struggle to prove that renewable energy could be the answer to humanity's future. "We've made it this far," he said one evening, as he looked out at the bustling city from his office. "But the real work is just beginning. We've got to be relentless. We can't afford to let up." Amanda, who had been with him through it all, smiled. "We've come too far to turn back now. Let's finish what we started." The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Solar Nexus wasn't just a company. It was a movement, and Jimmy, along with his team, would stop at nothing to see it succeed. The endorsement from Barack Obama had pushed Solar Nexus into the global spotlight. The company now found itself at a critical juncture, with its expansion into international markets gaining speed and attention. The pressure was mounting as the team prepared to take on some of the largest and most lucrative energy markets in the world. Yet, despite the progress, they knew that with every new venture came new obstacles, both expected and unforeseen. With the initial success in South America and Southeast Asia, Solar Nexus had already proven that its model worked outside the U.S. The team now set their sights on more ambitious territories: India, China, and Europe, regions with large populations and immense energy demands. However, entering these new markets wasn't without its challenges. While the economic opportunities were enormous, the political, cultural, and regulatory landscapes varied dramatically. India, for example, was committed to renewable energy but still had a significant reliance on coal. In China, the sheer scale of government involvement in the energy sector meant that partnerships would require navigating bureaucratic red tape. Meanwhile, Europe, with its commitment to sustainability, presented both challenges and opportunities. "We need to be strategic," said Rebecca as she outlined the blueprint for expansion. "India's government is supportive of solar energy, but we need local partners to navigate the infrastructure challenges. In China, we'll need to work through joint ventures. And in Europe, we'll face a different kind of competition, but if we can show our superior technology, we can lead the market." Elon leaned in, his eyes scanning the map. "What we're doing isn't just about selling solar panels. It's about creating ecosystems. Communities in these regions need more than just technology. They need training, jobs, and education about sustainable living. We need to build the future, not just the energy solutions." India was a high priority on their expansion plan. The country had one of the largest populations in the world, and its government had committed to scaling up solar power as part of its ambitious energy transition strategy. Yet, the country faced significant challenges in energy distribution, rural infrastructure, and financing. As the team traveled to New Delhi for talks with government officials and business leaders, they quickly realized how complex the situation was. While India's commitment to solar energy was clear, the bureaucratic hurdles were immense. "We can't even get a straightforward contract signed without weeks of negotiations," Amanda said after their first meeting. "This is going to be slower than we thought." But they also recognized the potential. A partnership with India's largest energy provider could unlock access to millions of people in rural areas, communities that had never had reliable electricity. Solar Nexus could bring clean, affordable power to these regions. "We need to find the right local partners who can move things forward," said Jimmy, his frustration tempered by the optimism that had carried him through other challenges. "We know the technology works. Now it's about finding the right infrastructure." Meanwhile, the team was preparing for their entry into China, a country known for its rapid industrial growth, but also its tightly controlled political and economic system. The Chinese government had made significant strides in renewable energy in recent years, but it still controlled much of the energy market. "We've got to get this right," Rebecca said, examining the Chinese market. "We don't want to make the same mistakes we did in Saudi Arabia. This isn't just about selling a product, it's about building the right relationships." Elon was eager to get involved, but knew the risks. "We're going to have to be careful. There's a lot of red tape, and we'll likely face resistance from local players who see us as competition. But if we can partner with the right people, we could scale faster than anywhere else." Solar Nexus's first Chinese partnership was a joint venture with a state-owned energy company, allowing them to bypass some of the most stringent regulatory obstacles. The deal was a delicate balancing act, but after months of negotiation, the partnership was finalized. As the team focused on international expansion, an unexpected crisis hit. A hacking group, believed to be backed by one of SolarNexus's largest competitors, managed to breach the company's security systems. They gained access to sensitive client data and internal documents, causing a major breach of trust. "This is a serious issue," said Michael, his voice tinged with frustration as he briefed the team on the situation. "We've worked hard to build this reputation. A security breach like this could unravel everything." The hackers leaked documents to the press, which included details about future projects and the company's internal financials. The media began to paint SolarNexus as untrustworthy, questioning whether they were as secure and stable as their investors believed. "This is a direct attack," Jimmy said, pacing around the room. "Someone's trying to take us down. We need to regain control of this narrative." Elon was already at work. "We can't let this crisis define us. We've faced setbacks before. Let's show the world that we can bounce back. First, we'll address the breach directly. Full transparency. Then, we double down on security measures. We have to reassure our partners, our clients, and our customers that we've taken all necessary steps." The team quickly moved into damage control mode. They hired top cybersecurity experts to investigate the breach and improve their security protocols. They also released a public statement, acknowledging the breach and outlining the steps they were taking to protect their stakeholders moving forward. "The transparency approach was the right move," Amanda said, reviewing the public response. "We need to prove that we're trustworthy, and we're doing that." The press is beginning to move away from sensationalizing the breach. Despite the public setbacks, SolarNexus had the right tools and resources to recover. Within weeks, the company regained momentum, and their security systems were stronger than ever. The crisis had tested them, but it had also forged a new resolve. As they moved forward, the global expansion began to show real results. Partnerships in India and China were slowly starting to bear fruit, and the European market, with its strong commitment to clean energy, was proving to be an exciting new frontier. But the most significant shift was in how the world viewed SolarNexus. The company wasn't just an American upstart. It was now a truly global player with the power to change the course of history. "We're on the brink of something massive," Jimmy said, looking at the latest global expansion reports. "We're no longer just a company. We're part of a movement toward clean energy, sustainability, and a better future for the world." As the team gathered for their next steps, they knew that this was only the beginning. The energy landscape was shifting, and with it, the power dynamics of the world. SolarNexus had the opportunity to lead this charge and make history in the process. "We've got the tools, the talent, and the vision," Elon said. "Now it's time to push forward. The world is ready for what we have to offer, and we're not going to stop until we've changed the future of energy." With the successful expansion into India, China, and Europe, SolarNexus had officially become a global player. The company was no longer just a shining example of innovative technology. It was a movement that had captured the attention of governments, corporations, and everyday citizens alike. Yet, for all the progress, the challenges continued to mount. The more successful they became, the more powerful their enemies grew, and the higher the stakes. As SolarNexus soared, so did the pressure on its leadership. Every decision seemed to carry immense weight, every move scrutinized by both supporters and adversaries. Jimmy, once a scrappy entrepreneur with a dream, was now the face of a revolution. But with that spotlight came an overwhelming responsibility. "Jimmy, are you sure about this?" Amanda asked, concern evident in her voice. "We're moving so fast. What if we're pushing too hard? What if we're not ready for all this?" Jimmy sighed, staring out of his office window. The view of the city had once been a symbol of everything he wanted to build, but now, it felt like a constant reminder of the immense pressure on his shoulders. "I don't know if we'll ever be ready, but we can't stop now. Too much is at stake. The world is counting on us. If we don't push forward, who will?" Amanda didn't respond immediately, her eyes thoughtful. Finally, she spoke. "Just remember, you're not alone in this. We're all in it together." The next blow came from an unlikely source. A major investor, who had been integral to the company's expansion, decided to pull out. The reason was a combination of market uncertainty, internal politics, and a growing concern about Solar Nexus's rapid pace. "We've lost a significant portion of our funding," Rebecca said, walking into Jimmy's office with a stack of reports. "And it's not just one investor. There's been a ripple effect. Other backers are getting nervous. They're questioning whether Solar Nexus can keep up with its promises." Jimmy looked at the papers, his stomach tightening. "This can't be happening. Not now." Amanda leaned in, trying to reassure him. "We've faced setbacks before. This is just another hurdle. We've built a solid foundation. We have a product that works. We can weather this storm." Rebecca nodded. "We've got to go back to basics. Reassure the investors. Show them the numbers, the projections. We need to remind them why they believed in us in the first place." As the tension within the company grew, a familiar voice rang out across the media. Elon Musk, who had been somewhat quieter in recent months, took to social media to voice his unwavering support for Solar Nexus. In a tweet that would go viral, he wrote, "Solar Nexus is the future of energy. It's not just about business, it's about saving the planet. The haters don't understand the vision. Keep pushing at Solar Nexus. The world needs you." The tweet sent shockwaves through the industry. Investors who had been hesitant suddenly felt a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that someone with Musk's influence and track record had their back. "It's like he's giving us a lifeline," Rebecca said, her tone slightly more optimistic. "We needed that." Jimmy smiled faintly. Elon doesn't do anything by accident. He knows exactly what he's doing. The endorsement from Elon Musk, combined with Solar Nexus's relentless drive, helped them navigate the storm. The company began to regain its footing, reassuring investors and scaling operations. But Jimmy knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, and they would face even tougher challenges. "What do we do next?" Amanda asked, her voice filled with determination. "We keep moving forward," Jimmy replied. "We don't slow down. We don't back down. We've already come too far. We've got the world watching us now, and we're going to make sure that we lead the charge. The future of energy is in our hands, and we won't stop until we've changed the world." As the weeks passed, the Solar Nexus team worked tirelessly to address the challenges ahead. The political landscape in India and China continued to be a minefield, with Solar Nexus having to navigate increasingly complex regulations and local opposition. Yet, in Europe, the company found success, with governments eager to support clean energy initiatives. With every victory, however, the team couldn't shake the feeling that a larger battle was looming on the horizon. Sinclair Energy, along with other fossil fuel giants, wasn't about to let Solar Nexus take over the global energy market without a fight. "We know they're coming for us," Rebecca said, her voice steely with resolve. "They'll do everything they can to stop us. We need to be prepared." Elon, always thinking ahead, began making preparations for what he called Phase 2 of Solar Nexus's global mission. "We can't just compete with fossil fuels. We need to disrupt them entirely. Let's think bigger. Let's take this to a new level." As Solar Nexus prepared for the next phase of its global expansion, it became clear that the battle for the future of energy would not be won easily. The fossil fuel industry, shaken by Solar Nexus's success, was ready to fight back with everything they had. The next few months would be crucial, as the world watched to see if Solar Nexus could overcome the final obstacles and fulfill its promise of a cleaner, more sustainable future. But one thing was certain: Solar Nexus had already proven its resilience. And no matter the challenges, Jimmy and his team were ready for whatever came next. The energy revolution was now in full swing. Solar Nexus had proven itself to be an unstoppable force in the industry. From its modest beginnings to its global expansion, the company had grown exponentially. Yet, as it scaled new heights, the forces against it were also ramping up their efforts to stop the solar energy movement in its tracks. The tipping point came when Sinclair Energy, the largest fossil fuel company in the world, made its move. Having watched Solar Nexus disrupt the market with its renewable energy solutions, Sinclair's leadership decided that it was time to step in and regain control over the energy sector. "We can't let this happen," said the CEO of Sinclair Energy, Victor Sinclair, during a closed-door meeting with his executive team. "Solar Nexus is cutting into our profits, and if we don't do something soon, we'll lose the game. We'll have to take this fight to them, aggressively." Their strategy was clear: a multi-pronged attack aimed at undermining Solar Nexus at every turn. It began with a massive smear campaign, leveraging the media and their vast network of lobbyists to spread doubts about the reliability and long-term sustainability of solar energy. The message was simple. Renewable energy was a fleeting trend, and fossil fuels remained the only viable solution for the future. They also began applying political pressure in key markets where Solar Nexus had already established footholds. In India, China, and even Europe, Sinclair Energy's political influence started to sow confusion and regulatory roadblocks for Solar Nexus. As the battle between Solar Nexus and the fossil fuel giants intensified, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Jimmy, Rebecca, Amanda, and the rest of the team had worked tirelessly to reach this point, and now they had to fight to protect the future they had built. "This is more than just about business now," Jimmy said during a strategy meeting with his team. "This is about the planet's future. We're up against the biggest industry in the world, but we can't back down. We've shown the world that solar is the future, and we can't let them take that away." Elon, ever the visionary, had a bold idea. "We need to take the fight to them, head on. Solar energy is not just a product, it's a movement. We need to make it a global priority, not just an American one." In response to the growing attacks, Solar Nexus shifted its approach. They began building a coalition of like-minded companies, government leaders, and activists who supported renewable energy and climate action. This Clean Energy Alliance became a formidable force, using its collective power to push for stronger policies and increase public awareness about the importance of transitioning to a sustainable future. Rebecca was instrumental in pulling together the coalition, navigating the delicate political landscape in countries where Solar Nexus was trying to gain ground. She used her diplomatic skills to bring together unlikely allies, from environmental NGOs to progressive political leaders. "We need to make it clear that this isn't just about energy," Rebecca said. "This is about securing a future for our children. We have to show that the solar movement is bigger than the oil and gas companies. It's a matter of survival for our planet." As Solar Nexus's global impact continued to grow, the fossil fuel industry began to push back harder. The attacks became more personal, with negative ads targeting Jimmy, questioning his motives and his ability to lead. The media was flooded with reports about the uncertainty of renewable energy and the danger of transitioning too quickly away from fossil fuels. "We knew this would happen," Amanda said, reviewing a new round of media coverage. "They're trying to discredit us at every turn." Jimmy was undeterred. "We've faced challenges before. This is just another one. We need to stay focused on our mission. Let them attack. We'll show them through action." Elon's response to the mounting pressure was something no one expected. He proposed a radical new initiative. Solar Nexus would develop the first fully integrated, self-sustaining city powered entirely by renewable energy. This city would not only serve as a proof of concept, but as a symbol of what the future could look like if the world embraced clean energy. "We've got to show the world that solar isn't just an alternative," Elon said with fervor. "It's the answer. Let's build a city, a living, breathing example of what the future of energy could look like. If we can build this, we'll change everything." The team immediately got to work on the concept, which they named Solar City. It would include solar-powered homes, transportation, water systems, and waste management, all built with the latest sustainable technologies. The announcement sent shockwaves through the energy industry. Solar Nexus was no longer just a company selling solar panels. It was becoming the beacon of a new way of life. As the Solar City project moved forward, the global battle over energy raged on. Sinclair Energy had increased its lobbying efforts, and in some regions, it seemed like they were succeeding in stalling clean energy policies. But Solar Nexus's momentum was undeniable. Countries that had once been reluctant to embrace renewable energy were now signing on to ambitious clean energy commitments. Yet, for all the progress, the battle was far from over. The fossil fuel industry wasn't going to give up without a fight. Their strategies were becoming more extreme, with new tactics like spreading misinformation and attempting to sabotage renewable energy infrastructure. Just as Solar Nexus was about to unveil the first phase of Solar City, disaster struck. A massive hacking attempt targeted the company's mainframe, attempting to steal sensitive designs and disrupt the project. The hackers, it seemed, were working for a shadow group with ties to Sinclair Energy. "This is bad," Michael said, analyzing the cyber attack. They've breached our defenses, and they're trying to shut us down. But Jimmy, who had learned to face adversity head-on, refused to back down. We've been through worse. This won't stop us. We have the best cybersecurity team in the world. Get them on it now. Within hours, the team was able to identify the source of the attack and thwart it. But the threat lingered. It was clear that the fossil fuel giants weren't just fighting for market share. They were fighting for their survival. With Solar City nearing completion, Jimmy made a bold decision. He would personally address the world in a live broadcast. This would be his chance to share the company's vision and commitment to the future of the planet, and to rally people from every corner of the globe to support the renewable energy movement. On the day of the broadcast, millions of people tuned in. Jimmy's message was clear and powerful. We are at a crossroads. The choice we make today will determine the future of our children and grandchildren. Will we continue down the path of destruction, or will we choose a brighter, cleaner future powered by the sun? The broadcast went viral, and within hours, support for Solar Nexus and the clean energy movement surged. Governments, businesses, and individuals all over the world began to rally behind Solar Nexus's vision. The battle for the future of energy had reached its climax. Solar Nexus, against all odds, was on the brink of revolutionizing the energy landscape. But Sinclair Energy and other fossil fuel giants weren't backing down. The final showdown would determine who would shape the world's energy future. Would Solar Nexus succeed in turning the tide for renewable energy, or would the forces of the past win out? The momentum behind Solar Nexus had never been stronger. People were rallying to the cause, governments were starting to enforce stronger climate regulations, and even some of the most influential figures in business were endorsing clean energy. But the forces working against Solar Nexus were just as determined to prevent a world powered by the sun. As Solar Nexus pushed forward, the political landscape began to shift. Governments in key countries, particularly the United States, were under pressure from powerful fossil fuel lobbyists to slow down or outright block renewable energy progress. In Washington, D.C., an intense political battle was unfolding. Powerful senators, influenced by fossil fuel interests, were drafting legislation that could halt the growth of solar energy in America. Rebecca, always the strategist, found herself caught in a whirlwind of political maneuvering. "They're pulling out all the stops," she said, scanning the latest report. "They're lobbying hard for tax breaks for the oil companies. They're trying to make it harder for us to get the permits we need for Solar City." Jimmy was furious but determined. "We won't let them win. We fought too hard to back down now." Elon, ever the visionary, called for action. "We need to show the world what's at stake. We can't just wait for them to make their move. Let's put the pressure on. Public support is key. We need to turn this into a battle that people can't ignore." To counter the political pressure, Solar Nexus launched a massive public awareness campaign. The goal was simple: to make the public understand that this battle wasn't just about business, it was about saving the planet. They produced powerful advertisements, showcasing the devastation caused by fossil fuels and the promise of a cleaner, brighter future powered by renewable energy. "We're not just selling solar panels," Jimmy said in a recorded interview. "We're fighting for the future of our planet. We're giving people a choice to protect our environment, our children, and the world we leave behind." The campaign quickly went viral. People from all over the world shared the videos, and protests in favor of renewable energy spread across the globe. There was a palpable sense of urgency, and the momentum was undeniable. The pressure on politicians reached its peak when the United Nations called for a global summit on climate change and energy policy. The summit, which would be attended by world leaders, was the perfect stage for Solar Nexus to make its case. Jimmy, Amanda, and Rebecca were invited to speak on behalf of the clean energy movement. But the political opposition was fierce. Sinclair Energy and their allies were working behind the scenes to discredit Solar Nexus and push their own agenda of fossil fuel dominance. "I don't trust the system," Rebecca said as they prepared for the summit. "We know they're going to pull every trick in the book to make us look bad. This won't be easy." But Jimmy refused to let fear hold him back. "This is our moment. We're not just representing Solar Nexus. We're representing everyone who believes in a sustainable future. We're going to make sure our voices are heard." As the summit began, the tension in the air was palpable. Leaders from around the world sat in a grand conference room, with Sinclair Energy's representatives waiting to make their case for continued reliance on fossil fuels. Solar Nexus's team was prepared to counter their arguments with facts, figures, and heart. But nothing could prepare them for what happened next. In a shocking move, a group of climate scientists, supported by research from Solar Nexus, unveiled new data that showed the devastating long-term effects of continued fossil fuel use. The data was so compelling that even the most staunch fossil fuel advocates in the room were forced to reconsider their positions. "We're at a crossroads," said one of the leading climate scientists. "The evidence is clear. The longer we wait to embrace renewable energy, the more irreversible the damage will be. The time for action is now." The room fell silent as the implications of the data set in. For the first time in years, the momentum seemed to be shifting away from the fossil fuel industry. The turning point came when Jimmy took the stage to deliver his speech. The pressure was overwhelming, but as he looked out at the world leaders, he felt a sense of calm. This was his moment to not just advocate for Solar Nexus, but to speak for the planet. "We are here today because the world is watching us," he began, his voice steady but passionate. "The world is watching us to see if we're going to rise to the challenge of protecting our environment, of creating a world where future generations can thrive. But most importantly, the world is waiting for us to make the right choice. The choice to embrace renewable energy, to stand up to the forces that want to keep us stuck in the past." His words resonated with the audience. One by one, leaders began to speak up in support of Solar Nexus and the clean energy movement. Even some of the most powerful figures who had previously been allied with the fossil fuel industry now seemed willing to entertain the idea of a transition to solar power. Just as it seemed that Solar Nexus had won the day, a shocking betrayal occurred. A high-ranking politician, who had been one of Solar Nexus's most vocal supporters, suddenly turned against them. In an unexpected press conference, the politician announced his decision to support new legislation that would provide massive subsidies to fossil fuel companies, effectively reversing the progress that had been made in the summit. "This isn't over," Rebecca said, her voice filled with resolve. "They're trying to play dirty, but we can't let them win. We have the people on our side." The betrayal shook Solar Nexus, but it also ignited a fire in their supporters. The clean energy movement, galvanized by the attack, took to the streets in massive numbers. Protests and petitions flooded governments worldwide, demanding that they stop supporting fossil fuel subsidies and invest in renewable energy. Jimmy and his team knew that they had no choice but to push forward. The battle wasn't over yet, but they could feel the tide turning. Every protest, every voice raised in support of clean energy, made it clearer that the world was ready for change. In the end, Solar Nexus won the global battle. The combined efforts of their team, the Clean Energy Alliance, and millions of people who believed in a sustainable future had overcome the forces of the fossil fuel industry. The world began to transition to solar power, with governments passing new legislation and businesses investing in renewable energy at an unprecedented rate. But the victory was bittersweet. The fight had taken its toll, and there were still challenges ahead. The future of the planet was now in the hands of those who had stood up for change, and Solar Nexus had become the symbol of a new, cleaner world. With the global transition to solar energy gaining unstoppable momentum, Solar Nexus had achieved what many thought impossible. Yet, as the dust settled from the intense battle with the fossil fuel industry, the team realized that their work was far from over. They had won the fight for the future of energy, but the real challenge had only just begun, turning the world into a truly sustainable, equitable, and thriving place for generations to come. The first task was to scale Solar Nexus's operations to meet the growing demand for clean energy. They began to build massive solar farms across continents. Desert landscapes in Africa and the Middle East were transformed into vast fields of solar panels, while urban rooftops were adapted for solar use in major cities around the world. As the company expanded, it also began integrating innovative technologies like energy storage systems that allowed solar power to be stored and used when the sun wasn't shining. This was the key to overcoming the intermittent nature of solar energy and ensuring that everyone, no matter where they lived, had access to reliable and affordable power. "We're no longer just about solar panels," Jimmy explained at the company's headquarters. "We're about building an infrastructure that supports the future, a clean, sustainable future." But Solar Nexus wasn't just building solar infrastructure, it was building communities. The company established partnerships with governments and NGOs to provide energy to the poorest regions of the world, where electricity was scarce or non-existent. Solar Nexus's vision wasn't just to dominate the market, it was to uplift the world. The success of Solar Nexus had sparked a revolution in the way the world thought about energy, but it also led to significant shifts in global power dynamics. As nations committed to renewable energy, the oil and gas markets began to decline. In places where fossil fuel had once been king, new industries rose to prominence. In the United States, for example, entire regions that had depended on coal mining began retraining their workers in clean energy technologies. People who had spent decades working in the fossil fuel industry found new jobs in solar panel manufacturing, energy storage solutions, and clean tech innovation. "This is the future we dreamed of," said Rebecca as she toured one of the newly established solar tech factories in West Virginia, a region hit hardest by the decline of coal. "We're not just replacing an old system, we're creating new opportunities for everyone." But not all were happy with these changes. The fossil fuel giants, although weakened, still had influence and wealth at their disposal. They began to push back in subtler ways, trying to undermine the transition by questioning the reliability of renewable energy and spreading fear about potential job losses. "They'll fight us every step of the way," Amanda warned. "But we can't let them succeed. The future is here, and there's no turning back." While Solar Nexus had made incredible strides, it soon became clear that not all countries were moving at the same pace. Developing nations, despite the abundance of solar potential, faced challenges in terms of infrastructure, investment, and policy. Despite the efforts of Solar Nexus to provide affordable energy solutions, many nations were still stuck in the cycle of poverty and dependence on outdated energy sources. Elon Musk, recognizing this, pushed for an ambitious new project, Solar Nexus's next frontier: energy for all. "We've proven that solar is the future," Elon said during a press conference. "But now we have to prove that the future is for everyone. We will launch an initiative to ensure that every corner of the Earth, no matter how remote, has access to affordable, clean energy." The initiative aimed at bringing solar power to underserved regions through decentralized, off-grid solutions. Solar Nexus worked with international organizations and governments to deliver small, mobile solar solutions to remote villages, schools, and hospitals, improving quality of life and offering the hope of a better future. Amidst the whirlwind of success and challenges, Jimmy found himself in a moment of quiet reflection. As he stood on the rooftop of Solar Nexus's headquarters in California, looking out at the vast solar array below, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment, but also a quiet anxiety. "We've done it," Jimmy said to Rebecca, who stood beside him. "We've changed the world." Rebecca smiled but could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "And yet, it's just the beginning, right? The fight for sustainability, equity, and the future of our planet is never truly over." Jimmy nodded, taking a deep breath. "I know. There's so much more we can do." Solar Nexus was just the spark. The real work lies in making sure the world we've envisioned stays that way. As he reflected, Jimmy realized that the true power of their success lay not in the solar panels or the technology they'd created, but in the people. It was the millions who had joined their cause, the communities they'd empowered, and the children who would grow up in a world where clean energy was a given, not a dream. Even as Solar Nexus flourished, new challenges began to emerge. Climate change, while mitigated by the shift to renewable energy, was already having irreversible effects. Extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and changing ecosystems were wreaking havoc on vulnerable populations. Elon was quick to point out the next phase of the movement. "We've solved the energy crisis. Now we need to focus on the climate crisis." The company refocused its efforts, expanding its portfolio to include carbon capture technologies and working with environmental organizations to restore damaged ecosystems. Solar Nexus's reach was now not just about providing energy, it was about ensuring the long-term health of the planet. The world had come to see the value of sustainability and clean energy. Solar Nexus had become more than just a company. It had become a symbol of hope for the future. As the company moved forward, it carried with it the belief that humanity could create a better, more harmonious world, one powered by the sun and fueled by innovation. The final chapter of Solar Nexus's journey would be about ensuring that this new world order was equitable and inclusive. The fight for global energy equality was far from over. It was now time for the final push, for Solar Nexus to complete its vision of a future where the planet and its people thrive together. Jimmy, Elon, Rebecca, Amanda, and the entire team knew they had created something monumental. But the real challenge, they realized, was not just about technology. It was about inspiring a global movement, a movement of people, of nations, and of hearts, united in the pursuit of a better tomorrow. As Solar Nexus reached the zenith of its global influence, the world began to feel the impact of its pioneering efforts. The future had arrived, but with it, new complexities emerged, problems far more intricate than the ones they had already overcome. The landscape of global energy was changing rapidly, but so was the political and environmental landscape. In the midst of this, Solar Nexus had to face the consequences of its success, both positive and negative, and forge ahead to solidify a new world order. By now, Solar Nexus had built the most sophisticated solar network the world had ever seen. Solar arrays spanned the globe, feeding energy into homes, cities, and industries. Energy deserts were vanishing, and for the first time in history, energy equity seemed within reach. But as the reach of clean energy spread, an inevitable consequence reared its head: the collapse of traditional power structures. Countries that had relied on fossil fuels were now struggling to reinvent themselves. Once powerful oil economies were now on the defensive, and national leaders in these countries faced growing unrest. The impact was particularly severe in the Middle East and Russia, where the oil industry had formed the backbone of their economies. These nations, once the largest energy exporters, found themselves at a crossroads, with many questioning whether their survival depended on transitioning to new industries or clinging to outdated ones. "We can't let this crisis go to waste," said Amanda at a high-level international summit, speaking directly to representatives from former oil-producing nations. "This is an opportunity to evolve, to embrace a future where your nations are leaders in renewable energy. Solar Nexus can help you make that transition." However, not all countries were ready to embrace change. While some were eager to diversify, others, particularly Russia and certain factions in the Middle East, dug in their heels. The wealth and political influence tied to fossil fuels were too great, and resistance to renewable energy was fierce. The geopolitical ramifications of this clash were immediate. As tensions rose, the world found itself at a critical juncture. Solar Nexus, despite its immense success, was suddenly thrust into the role of a global mediator, tasked with navigating the delicate balance between the legacy of fossil fuel empires and the sustainable future that the company had worked tirelessly to build. A new Cold War of sorts emerged, this time, not over nuclear power or ideological control, but over energy resources. On one side were the nations embracing renewable energy, working with Solar Nexus to shift their economies and reduce carbon footprints. On the other side were the fossil fuel holdouts, lobbying to preserve the oil-driven power structure that had dominated for over a century. Elon Musk, who had once seen clean energy as a technical challenge, now found himself facing an even greater test: the task of reshaping global power. "We've achieved a massive breakthrough," Elon said during an emergency meeting at Solar Nexus headquarters. "But what we're up against is something even bigger: geopolitical instability. We need to make sure this transition happens peacefully, without throwing the world into chaos." Rebecca and Jimmy agreed, realizing that Solar Nexus could no longer be seen merely as a company. It was now a central player in the global political arena, with the power to influence the future of nations. While Solar Nexus's solar revolution had radically improved the world's energy landscape, the environmental toll of the previous century's fossil fuel consumption was far from erased. Despite all the progress, climate change continued to accelerate. Flooding in low-lying regions, droughts in once fertile areas, and wildfires across the globe became routine events. One particularly devastating event, an unprecedented wildfire in California, sent shockwaves through the global community. The fire was unlike anything the world had seen before, burning through entire towns and reaching record-breaking temperatures. The inferno left a path of destruction, displacing thousands of families and devastating ecosystems. As the flames raged, the need for more drastic climate action became painfully clear. The crisis sparked a major public outcry, with activists and scientists calling for even more aggressive measures to combat the climate emergency. "We've stopped one catastrophe, but another is already here," Rebecca said as she addressed a packed conference hall. "Solar Nexus has proven that a sustainable energy future is possible, but now we need to step up our efforts in mitigating the damage caused by years of neglect." To answer the growing demands for climate action, Solar Nexus began to expand its operations beyond solar energy production. Elon Musk announced the launch of a new initiative, planetary restoration. "The next chapter for Solar Nexus is not just about energy," Elon declared in a live stream to the world. "We are going to focus on the restoration of ecosystems, carbon capture, and sustainable agriculture. It's time to fix the damage we've done, not just with energy, but with every aspect of how we interact with the planet." Planetary restoration was a bold vision that went beyond solar energy. It included initiatives for massive reforestation, carbon capture technologies, and the development of sustainable agricultural practices that minimized waste and maximized efficiency. It also meant taking bold steps to reverse the effects of pollution and protect the natural resources the world still had. The idea was simple but revolutionary. No industry should operate in isolation. Solar Nexus believed that a truly sustainable future required integration of every element of human activity with the environment. "We can't just create energy solutions and forget about the Earth," said Amanda, who had become an outspoken advocate for environmental restoration. "It's about reconnecting with the planet in a way that nurtures it, not exploits it." As the company expanded its focus to climate restoration, it also began to work with governments, NGOs, and activists to unite the global community around a common cause. It wasn't just about technology, it was about inspiring a shift in values. "People are starting to understand that this isn't just about saving the planet," Jimmy said in a conversation with an international climate group. "It's about ensuring the future of humanity. If we don't fix what we've broken, nothing else will matter." The message was clear: sustainable energy, ecosystem restoration, and climate action were no longer separate goals. They were all part of the same movement, one that required global cooperation and commitment. As Solar Nexus continued to lead the way into this new world, Jimmy, Elon, Rebecca, and the rest of the team knew they had forged something that would last for generations. They had not just created a company, they had created a movement. And while the future of energy, climate change, and global politics remained uncertain, one thing was clear. The actions of Solar Nexus had proven that the impossible was not only achievable, it was already happening. "We've only just begun," Elon said, looking out over the horizon. "This is not just a revolution in energy. It's a revolution in how we live on this planet. And it's a revolution we all must take part in." As Solar Nexus moved forward with its ambitious mission to restore the planet and ensure the future of energy, the world found itself at a critical juncture. The success of the company had propelled the global transition to clean, renewable energy, but the ultimate test still lay ahead. How to unite humanity in the effort to prevent ecological collapse and secure a thriving, sustainable future for all. The transition from a fossil fuel-powered world to one dominated by solar and renewable energy had been nothing short of revolutionary. However, as Solar Nexus grew into an ever larger force, new, more complex challenges began to emerge. Challenges that no one could have predicted when they first embarked on this journey. Despite the progress in energy equality, there were still deep inequalities around the world. The wealthiest nations had already adopted renewable energy solutions, but many developing countries were still struggling to keep up. They faced issues such as political instability, lack of infrastructure, and financial difficulties that made the transition to clean energy a distant dream. Solar Nexus, under the leadership of Elon, Jimmy, and Rebecca, knew that they needed to expand their reach further, not just in terms of energy production, but by addressing the broader issues of wealth and resource distribution. It was not enough to provide electricity. They had to ensure that the benefits of clean energy were equitably shared. "That's the challenge," Jimmy explained in a speech at the Global Clean Energy Summit. "We've created the infrastructure, but we can't forget that this transition must lift everyone. We have to ensure that no one is left behind. That's how we truly create a sustainable future." To address this, Solar Nexus launched the Equity Initiative, a program that focused on providing financial aid, training, and energy solutions to the most impoverished regions of the world. The program partnered with local governments, community leaders, and NGOs to create sustainable local economies powered by renewable energy. However, not everyone was ready to embrace the future that Solar Nexus had envisioned. As the company's influence grew, it faced increasing resistance from entrenched interests, particularly from the surviving fossil fuel giants and political forces who saw their grip on power slipping away. In the United States, a powerful coalition of oil and gas companies, along with politicians who depended on their financial support, began to mount a campaign to slow down the renewable revolution. They spread misinformation about the reliability of solar energy, funded studies casting doubt on its viability, and even attempted to block international agreements aimed at curbing carbon emissions. "They're going to fight us harder than ever," Amanda warned during a strategic meeting. "This isn't just about energy anymore. It's about control." In countries where oil had been the lifeblood of the economy for decades, there were even more overt efforts to thwart the transition. Some governments began imposing tariffs and trade restrictions on solar products, attempting to protect their fossil fuel-driven industries. But Solar Nexus, under the leadership of Elon and the team, was not about to back down. They knew that this was the final frontier in the battle for the planet's future. The stakes were higher than ever, but the team was more determined than ever to push forward. Despite the growing resistance, Solar Nexus continued to innovate at an unprecedented pace. With the world watching, the company unveiled its most ambitious project yet, the Solar Supergrid. The Solar Supergrid was a global network of interconnected solar farms, energy storage systems, and advanced smart grid technologies that would allow solar energy to be distributed globally. Unlike previous solar infrastructure, this new system would be far more resilient, able to withstand natural disasters and distribute energy across borders, providing every country with a share of the world's clean energy. The launch of the Solar Supergrid was a game-changer, fundamentally shifting the way the world viewed energy. It was no longer just about local or national energy independence. It was about a shared global energy economy, where resources were distributed and managed with equity and efficiency. As the Solar Supergrid was brought online, it became a symbol of the world's collective commitment to a sustainable future. Countries that had previously resisted the transition to renewable energy found themselves drawn into the network, realizing that their futures were intertwined with the global effort to combat climate change. Even as political resistance and global challenges persisted, there was a growing recognition that humanity's future depended on cooperation, not division. The success of Solar Nexus and its Solar Supergrid initiative became a turning point, a moment when the world united to face the climate crisis as a single, collective force. "I think we've done it," Rebecca said quietly as she stood in the command center of the Solar Nexus headquarters, watching the solar grid expand across the world. "We've created the future. Now we just have to protect it." Elon nodded, but he was already thinking about the next frontier. It's not enough to just power the world with clean energy. We have to ensure that future generations inherit a world worth living in. That means rethinking everything, from the way we grow our food, to how we build cities, to how we treat the planet. And so, Solar Nexus began its next major initiative, planetary stewardship, an all-encompassing effort to ensure that the world's ecosystems were restored, that biodiversity was protected, and that the balance between human development and nature was maintained. As the years passed, Solar Nexus's influence continued to grow. The world had embraced a new era of sustainability, and with that, the global economy began to shift toward industries focused on climate restoration, renewable energy, and environmental protection. Fossil fuel companies, once powerful forces, became relics of a bygone era. Their influence diminished as the world moved toward a new era of cooperation and global responsibility. The planet's ecosystems began to heal as reforestation efforts took root and wildlife populations began to recover. Clean energy had become the backbone of a new economy, one that prioritized the health of the planet and the well-being of future generations. In the final moments of the chapter, we return to Jimmy and Rebecca. Standing together on the rooftop of Solar Nexus's headquarters, they gaze out over the expansive solar fields, now covering much of the globe. "We've come a long way," Jimmy says, his voice filled with awe, "but it feels like we've only scratched the surface." Rebecca smiles. "It's been a journey of a lifetime." But we're part of something bigger now. We've given the world the tools to fix what we've broken. And I believe we'll see the world thrive, one powered by clean energy and shared responsibility. And so, the final chapter of Solar Nexus's incredible journey had come to a close. The future, once uncertain, was now clear. Humanity had embraced its responsibility to the planet, and the world stood on the precipice of a new golden age, a time where prosperity, sustainability, and unity could reign. As the sun rose on a new day, a new chapter in humanity's history was about to unfold. The world was no longer the same. It was a place of hope, resilience, and unimaginable potential. The transformative journey that began with a groundbreaking vision to harness the power of solar energy had not only reshaped the global energy landscape, but had also led to a deeper, more profound shift in the way people viewed their relationship with the planet. Solar Nexus had become more than just a company. It had evolved into a beacon of possibility for the future. The vision of Elon Musk, Amanda, Jimmy, and Rebecca had come to fruition in ways they could never have fully imagined. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Years had passed since the launch of the solar supergrid and the global efforts to restore the environment. Across continents, solar panels gleamed under the sun, bringing clean energy to every corner of the world. The Solar Nexus network, once an ambitious dream, had been realized. Now, nations that had once struggled with energy poverty were thriving. Solar Nexus's renewable energy infrastructure had empowered communities in the most remote and underserved regions. The innovations sparked by Solar Nexus had not only helped the planet survive, but had laid the groundwork for a future where the entire world could thrive in harmony with nature. It was no longer just about surviving the climate crisis. It was about flourishing within the boundaries of the Earth's limits. The company had pioneered the development of fusion energy, creating a new power source that was virtually limitless and clean. This breakthrough, combined with their solar and planetary restoration technologies, ensured that the world would never again face the threat of energy shortages. Humanity was on the precipice of the greatest leap in civilization's history. One of the most profound changes that came from Solar Nexus's rise was the creation of the Earth Charter, a global pact that united nations, corporations, and citizens under a shared commitment to preserving and restoring the planet. This document wasn't just a set of guidelines. It was a living framework that reshaped global governance, aligning economies and societies towards sustainability. The Earth Charter outlined key principles. 1. Universal energy access. Every person, regardless of their location or income, would have access to clean and sustainable energy. 2. Biodiversity protection. The restoration and protection of ecosystems and species would be prioritized to preserve the health of the planet. 3. Climate justice. Nations and corporations would take responsibility for their historical contributions to climate change, with a commitment to equitable solutions for developing countries. 4. Circular economy. Waste would be eliminated through innovative recycling, repurposing, and reusing materials, creating a truly circular economy where nothing went to waste. 5. Sustainable innovation. All technological development would be rooted in sustainability, ensuring that future advancements benefited both people and the planet. This groundbreaking document was signed by leaders from every corner of the world, from the leaders of the largest economies to the indigenous tribes that had long protected the Earth's most biodiverse regions. The Earth Charter symbolized the dawn of a new era, one where the health of the planet was intertwined with the health of its people. A few months after the Earth Charter was signed, a global initiative known as the Great Cleanup was launched. This unprecedented operation sought to remove the remnants of pollution that had accumulated over centuries: plastic in the oceans, carbon in the atmosphere, and toxins in the soil. While many feared that such a task was too immense, Solar Nexus had already developed the technologies to tackle it. Using advanced AI, drones, and robots, the Great Cleanup began. Solar-powered ocean vessels began collecting plastic waste, while carbon capture systems were deployed at large-scale factories and across polluted regions. Restoration projects took off in areas once devastated by deforestation, and rivers that had been choked by industrial waste started to flow clean once again. For the first time in history, humanity worked in unison, not as individual nations or corporations, but as a global collective, to repair the damage that had been done. The project wasn't completed overnight, but the results were tangible. Clean rivers, thriving forests, and beaches free from the debris of centuries of waste became symbols of the planet's recovery. As the world moved forward, Jimmy, Rebecca, and Elon found themselves reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Sitting together on the balcony of Solar Nexus's headquarters, overlooking the sprawling fields of solar panels, they realized that their vision had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. It's hard to believe that it all started with an idea about solar power, Rebecca said, gazing out at the horizon. We've changed the world. But more importantly, we've changed how people see their place in it. Elon, always the visionary, was thinking even further ahead. We've built a foundation. Now it's time to ensure that this progress continues. We're not done yet. There's so much more to do. Jimmy, who had become a key leader in the movement, looked at his friends. This is just the beginning. The next challenge is to make sure we never stop pushing for progress. Our future has to be built on innovation, compassion, and responsibility. They knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges. New crises would inevitably arise, and there were still many hurdles to overcome. But there was also a new sense of hope, one that had been created by their work and by the people who had come together to build this new world. Solar Nexus had not only transformed the way the world produced and consumed energy, but it had also shown humanity what was possible when people worked together to protect the Earth. The company's influence would echo through generations, a symbol of what could be achieved when innovation, courage, and collective willpower aligned for the common good. Across the world, children were growing up with a new worldview. A worldview where clean energy, environmental stewardship, and social responsibility were the norm, not the exception. Schools were teaching sustainability as a core subject, and the next generation of leaders was being raised with a deep sense of connection to the Earth and to each other. The world had not only survived, it had thrived. And Solar Nexus, led by Elon Musk, had become a cornerstone of that success, proving that with vision, innovation, and a deep commitment to the planet, anything was possible. As the story of Solar Nexus drew to a close, one question remained. What would the future look like for the generations to come? The answer was simple. It would be whatever they made of it. The new world, powered by clean energy and guided by the principles of the Earth Charter, was theirs to shape. They were the custodians of the planet, a planet that had been healed and had begun to flourish once again. The story of Solar Nexus had proven one thing above all. The future is in our hands, and we have the power to create it.